Good morning. My name is Brad Farron. I live in Norridge Walk and represent 15 communities in Somerset, Penobscot, and Kennebec counties.
Good morning. I'm Senator Stacey Guerin, representing all of the Scottsbluff County and part of Penobscot County.
Good morning. I'm Adam Lee. I represent House District 89, which is downtown and New Auburn.
We represent Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Representative Chad Perkins. I live in Dover Foxcroft, and I represent 7 towns in southeast Piscataquis County.
Good morning. I'm Michael Lemlin. I represent House District 53, which is Chelsea, Randolph, Pittston, and Dresden.
Madam Chair.
Good morning. I'm Anne Marie Mastracchio. I represent House District 142, which is part of the city of Sanford and the village of Springvale.
And I'm Craig Hickman. I represent 12 municipalities in southern Kennebec County, anchored in Winthrop and the city of Gardner. We also have with us today Director Peter Schleck and our committee clerk, Jennifer Greiner. Good morning to all of you.
Senator Tippin.
And Senator Tippin, you may please introduce yourself as well. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you. Mike Tipping, Senate District 8 in Penobscot County.
Thank you. The committee has a draft summary of our last meeting in our meeting binders, and if there are no comments and without objection, that summary is considered final. Seeing no objection, it is so. Next, to help the committee further consider the request by Senator Bickford and Representative Arata concerning non-citizens and their relative eligibility to obtain driving credentials in Maine, we welcome 2 senior leaders in the Office of the Secretary of State. You may step forward. These are Deputy Secretary of State for the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, Kathy Curtis, and Driver License Services Division Director, Chris Ireland. We welcome you both, and you are each invited to make an opening remark if you like, and then the chair will recognize committee members who may have questions for either or both of you. Welcome, good morning. And please turn the mic on.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the invitation to come and speak with you this morning and to answer your questions. I am Kathy Curtis, Deputy Secretary of State. I oversee the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, and I live in Winthrop. With me today is Driver License Services Director, Chris Ireland, and he lives in Pittston. I began my career with the Bureau of Motor Vehicles in 1978 and have been working with the Motor Vehicle Administration space for the last 48 years. Director Ireland joined the Bureau of Motor Vehicles in 2021 after a 29-year career in the Air Force. Given our direct expertise with the matter before you, we are here today on behalf of BMV and the Department of Secretary of State as a whole. For background, the Bureau of Motor Vehicles is responsible for upholding federal and state laws and rules, which are supported by our 5-year strategic plan. One of the 4 pillars in our strategic plan is a commitment to roadway safety. Not only as a motor vehicle administrator, but as a mother and a grandmother, I am committed to roadway safety. I take that responsibility very seriously. As we issue driver and identity credentials and manage and maintain driver history records. We are also committed to upholding federal and state laws and rules, and I'm proud of the work that our Bureau does. Both Maine law and the Federal Real ID Act require proof of citizenship or legal presence in the United States for non-citizens for driver licenses. To obtain a driver's license in Maine, an applicant must present the following to BMV: proof of residency in Maine, proof of U.S. citizenship or legal presence in the United States, 2 different forms of identity, and they must complete a vision screening. Additionally, the federal Real ID laws require that all motor vehicle agencies nationwide use the federal Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements system, or called SAVE, to verify the valid, unexpired legal status of all non-citizens applying for a Real ID compliant credential, which Maine follows. Also, with the exception of Canadian drivers who move to Maine, drivers new to the United States must successfully complete both a written and road exam with the Maine Bureau of Motor Vehicles in order to earn their driver license, even if they were licensed in their prior country of residence. Secretary Bellows has provided our processes and training, as well as specifics that we are able to share publicly regarding the two cases identified by Senator Bickford and Representative Arata in a letter, which was distributed to you yesterday afternoon by email. And I also have hard copies for you today. I'd like to walk through that letter with you because it does provide some very helpful information.
That's perfectly fine. I do believe the committee is in possession of the letter. We received it. It's in our binders. It's tab 2. If anyone wishes to follow along, you can put the extra letters. Deputy Secretary Cook, you can just leave them for the public if they would like to have them over there. Thank you.
Thank you very
Please
much.
proceed, Deputy
Yes.
Secretary.
First and foremost, it's important to know that we at the Department of Secretary of State grieve every time there's a roadway fatality. Our hearts go out to the loved ones of every victim. As the Secretary has described on the first page, the requirements to obtain a driver's license that I just went through in my opening remarks. On page 2 of the document, in the second paragraph, you'll see that she explains that non-citizens without permanent legal status in the United States will be issued a driver's license that expires at the same time as the expiration date indicated by their immigration documents demonstrating their legal presence. For example, a person who presents their U.S. citizen and Immigration Services issued work permit will be issued a driver's license that expires the same day that work permit expires. To renew their license, they must bring in an updated, unexpired document issued again by immigration authorities. Otherwise, BMV cannot and will not renew their license. The list of documents that we accept for legal presence for real ID credentials is codified in law, and you can find that in the Federal Code of Regulations 6 CFR Part 37. It should also be noted that the media reports often include a person's legal status at the time of entry. However, federal immigration law permits non-immigrants, such as visitors, international students, temporary foreign workers, for example, to apply for a change in any other status for which they are eligible under the immigration laws. For example, a person may enter the U.S. on a B2 visa and may change to a student visa upon admission to one of Maine's colleges or universities, or to an H-1B professional worker visa based on a job offering by a Maine employer. So the point is, a person can come in on one status, but they can request through the immigration authorities a change of that status. Any limited term non-citizen in Maine who applies to renew their Maine driver's license must show the BMV documentation that they are legally present and their current status, which may be entirely different from their status at entry, must be unexpired. We know that you have questions about 2 different drivers, and I'd like to go through those with you. They're outlined in the letter. On page 2, you'll see an explanation of the driver that was involved in the August 15th crash in Lewiston. That person was a limited term, non-citizen, non-commercial driver. He obtained a state ID card on March 12th of 2025, prior to which he had provided federally issued legal presence documents, which met the Maine law and department rule requirements. He passed his written driving exam and obtained his driver's permit on August 5th of 25. Tragically, that fatal accident occurred just a few days after that. When he lacked the significant driving practice on main roads. The second driver you asked about was involved in the August 16th fatal crash in New Gloucester. He was a limited term, non-citizen, non-commercial driver as well. He obtained his permit on May 2nd of 2019, and then his license later that year after passing his road test on October 28th of 2019. His initial Class C license was issued December 4th of 2019, prior to which he had provided federally issued legal presence documents, which met Maine law and department rule. He provided updated federally issued legal presence documents on November 22nd of 21 to extend his expiration date to May 23rd of 2022. He then renewed his license on May 9th of 22, again providing legal presence documents, and extended his expiration date on his license to May 9th of 26. The most recent renewal on May 6th of 25 was due to the customer's desire to upgrade his license to a Real ID compliant credential, which many Maine residents, 140,000 Maine residents, have done this year. As part of this upgrade, he provided, again, federally legal presence documents, which met the federal Real ID law, and extended his expiration date to May 8th of 2029. Each time he renewed his Maine license, he presented documentation of his continued valid immigration status, including his unexpired employment authorization document issued by USCIS based on that status. His valid legal status was also confirmed via the SAVE system that I mentioned earlier, including when he applied for his Real ID compliant document. Proof of residency is also required, and we want to point out that the term permanent Maine residence seems to be a term that is used, but it doesn't exist in law. Neither Maine nor federal Real ID statutes require citizens to be permanently here for a driver's license. They have to be legally here. International students attending higher education, doctors, and other professionals come into our communities, and they may be here on temporary protected status, asylum seekers, or many other categories, but they are not yet permanent. They don't have a permanent immigration status, yet they are here legally, and they are eligible to obtain a driver's license. I want to reiterate, BMV takes seriously the responsibility to ensure laws and rules governing the issuance of the credentials, both federal and state, are followed. To that end, and you've asked about how do we ensure that we comply with these laws, we have a legal presence guide that we provide to our staff. We constantly are training our staff. Our new staff receives many modules of training. This includes how and when to query the federal SAVE system. And then in more complex situations, we have an immigration attorney to help us understand the documents before us. We also routinely audit our frontline staff to verify that credentials are being issued appropriately and in accordance with the federal law. I hope this is helpful to you, and we are happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Curtis. And Director Island, I just wanted to check to see if you had anything to add before we open it up for questions, sir.
So I don't have anything to add at this point, other than to also offer my personal condolences to the family and friends of the victims of these two fatal crashes.
Thank you very much for being here. And before we open up for questions, Senator Dusan, would you please care to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Jill Dusan. I represent Senate District 27, which is part of Portland and part of Westbrook.
Thank you for being here today. Are there any questions from the committee for the Office of the Secretary of State at this time? Chair recognizes Representative Lemlin.
I have multiple questions. Sorry. I have multiple questions. One, is the BMV using authorization? Are you using work authorizations as a legal proof of to be here in residency? Is that one of the processes?
That,
Representative, good morning.
Director Allen, if you could just move the mic
Absolutely.
closer to you.
How's that, sir?
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Lane 29A motor vehicle statute tasks the Secretary of State and therefore the BMV, right, to verify legal presence in the United States before we issue any state ID or driver license. But Main 29A does not elaborate on how we do that or what documents we've referenced to determine somebody's eligibility for either of those two credentials. That list of documents that we accept is captured in Chapter 15 of our departmental rules. In which case, for example, to your question, a extended work document, an EAD, which is issued by the federal government and acknowledges somebody's right to stay in the United States to work through that duration of time, is one of those documents in our Chapter 15 rules that we use to allow staff to issue a state ID or a license.
Okay. And
Representative Lemon, if you could please defer for 1 second. Can you tell me the last time that rule was updated?
Those rules, sir, were last updated in 2022 and run through the formal state of Maine rulemaking process, reviewed twice by the Attorney General's office, and through that process, as well as a public hearing that we held on September 2nd prior to those rules being updated on November 2nd, sir. Rules were published and put into effect November 13th. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarity. Representative Lemon, you may continue.
thank you. People who are asylum seekers, they have to have a document stating that they're an approved asylum seeker. They receive a form from the federal government. If they don't have that form on them to provide, what do you do when they're claiming to be an asylum seeker? What's your process?
So our processes require our staff to physically and personally inspect all documents that someone would bring forward to claim legal presence. Our system, we enter into our system document numbers, document dates, document expiration dates into our system for every person that we categorize as a limited term credential holder in our system. We have those records. In the case of a real ID, federal law surrounding real ID requires that we also scan copies of those documents. We actually have digital copies of the documents our staff inspects when those folks come forward to apply.
What do you do as far as an asylum seeker if they don't have that form? Do you just deny them?
So whether they're asylum seeker or any other form of non-US citizen limited term individual, they're sent away and asked to come back with the proper documentation.
Okay. When an immigrant comes forward to try to receive a permit before the driver's license, they ask for an interpreter because they can't speak English. Where do these interpreters come from? Are they allowed to just pick any interpreter to come forward and present themselves for, or do you provide the interpreter that you pick?
So we have the ability to provide an interpreter if somebody asks for one. Individuals are allowed to bring forward interpreters, but those interpreters must complete a form declaring who they are.
Okay. Has it been brought to your attention, either one of you, that some of your examiners feel that these interpreters that they bring in are cheating? Has that been brought to your attention?
Sir, over the years, in my 4 years, there have been cases where those concerns have been brought forward. I know there were concerns brought forward before I took this position 4 years ago. We have guidance to our examiners in their handbook as to how to handle moments when they're concerned that cheating may be taking place. And fundamentally, that involves reporting up the chain of supervision. If they feel they've got enough to interrupt the test and stop the test, they're empowered to do that as well. And then we take those reports and we look into them. On occasion, we'll have our BMV detectives, sworn law enforcement officers, conduct formal investigations and look into that. We even had 2 cases this summer where we had a couple of our younger, newer, sharp examiners express concern that there was actually an imposter coming forward to complete a road test on behalf of somebody else. We obviously take that very seriously, as we would any accusation of cheating. We referred those to the detectives. One of those cases is in fact right now been referred to a DA in Southern Maine for criminal prosecution based on fraud and misstatement of fact.
What's the normal pass rate for people seeking a license or permit? What's the pass rate here in Maine?
Of the written set tests or the road tests, sir? Or?
Coming to an examiner for a permit, what's the pass rate?
So to come for the permit is the written exam, unless you've come through driver ed, in which case you complete that written exam with the driver ed school. I don't have that particular data point in front of me, sir, on the written. I can tell you that on the road, because I have looked at that recently, it's in the low 70s to mid 70s across the state for the first attempt at a road test.
Okay. And it has been brought to my attention that the pass rate for these immigrants who bring in interpreters is 100%. Doesn't that concern you? That would concern me as a manager. Does that bring?
Sir, if that were true, and I'm certainly happy to go back and look into that and let you know what our numbers reveal. I would be suspect of 100% if that's true as well.
You would be.
A human nature. I mean, if human nature is that not everybody gets it all right all the time.
Could you get me that information, please? Because I've been told by somebody that works for you that the pass rate's 100%. And their concern is that there is cheating and they've caught them cheating. One of the concerns is that instead of reading the question to the applicant, they say A or B or C, which they're not supposed to say. They're supposed to read the entire thing and then interpret. Now, I've been told by several examiners that they've brought this to your attention and that nothing has been done. Not only that, but these people have told me also, and they're willing to swear under oath that this is occurring. One person claimed that they were reprimanded for it. So this is a big concern of mine.
I'm aware of complaints in the past that we have addressed, that we've investigated, and we could not find substantial evidence, proof that cheating was taking place. We do not reprimand people for bringing forward information that we can substantiate. People can be reprimanded for the way they treat people in in-person transactions.
Thank you, Representative Lemon. We'll come back to you if you have any further questions, but before I take any others, can you give me scenarios? The word cheating, of course, sparks my attention, and an imposter is obviously a problem. What other kinds of quote unquote cheating would happen in the situations that Representative Lemon has asked about?
Cheating can take any form, I suppose. I mean, if we think back to our own grade school experiences and bringing notes and those ideas, even today there are some very high tech options to between your phone and Bluetooth to a set of Google glasses and some other things. And those we've heard stories of those things taking place in other states from our peers, and it could be across the board, Senator.
Do you see any difference in the evidence of cheating, if there is any, is there any significant statistical difference? And if you don't have this, I would love for this answer to come in the future, between citizens and non-citizens who are trying to receive a permit or a license.
So I don't have any statistical information that I can offer you right now that would that I could answer that with right now. But I can take that away and get back to you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Senator Farren, followed by Senator Dusan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Kathy and Director for being here, having this conversation. I try to wrap my head around the process, right? Because what I saw with the response and what the original request for us to look into this was there's two different factors, right? You've got the permit piece, right? And then you've got the license piece, two separate entities. And even this individual, the second individual that was here for a longer period of time, had a qualified license, passed a road test, had a license. We can get into the documentation and how they're there, but they were a licensed driver involved in a very bad fatality. I think part of the question I'm wrapping my head around in this process is on the permit piece, and specifically with the non-citizens that do not speak English and hire, and I guess this is my first question, these interpreters that have to fill out this form and testify that they are, it's an 81, that form, right, is that they are brought in by the applicant. Do you know whether that's a community service thing that is done? Are the applicants hiring these interpreters? Do you have a feel? That's question number one.
Fair. There are, I'm aware that some interpreters are offering their services for a fee. We don't have anything right now that prevents them from doing that in law or rule. We are absolutely mindful of how they're doing that, and in some cases wanting to make sure that that's taking place in a above board manner.
Thank you. So then the follow-up to that is if they have to fill out this form, because again, hearing rumors, people talk, all this other stuff, I'm a data guy, right? So we ought to be able to look at, you ought to be able to look at those Form 81s or whatever they are that they sign out. And if there's 1,000 of them and there's 5 interpreters that are doing that work or whatever, I mean, it's data, right? And going back through, is that something just to see if there's a reoccurring problem? Because what I anticipate is if I'm an examiner and I've got a non-citizen and an interpreter and they're talking about this test, I got no idea whether they're coaching them, filling in questions, telling them where to go. That examiner is kind of at a disadvantage to know whether there is something malfeasance going on or not. And I think that's part of this whole process is people don't have that warm fuzz. They think there's something wrong, but they can't tie into that. And I think that puts the examiners in a bad spot because no one wants to be that person that says, you know, you're cheating. That's a big allegation. And so I think that's part of the culture piece and how you get back around that. But I think it still goes back to this interpreter question. How many of them are doing it with that piece? Are they getting paid to do that? And I think that casts some shadow on the credibility of the process for me.
Senator, your comments as well as Representative Lemone's comments, I can offer to you that we do indeed keep those forms that the interpreters fill out and submit to us. So we absolutely have the ability to go dig that data up and get that back to you. Secondly, I'll offer that in recognition of part of this challenge, you will recall, sir, in the previous legislature, the Transportation Committee funded us resourcing to go out and have installed in our digital written test system the basic Class C license test in additional languages. So that it then theoretically reduces the requirement to have an interpreter if the test is being provided to you in your own language. And, the theory being you can learn it in your own language and be examined in your own language and, you're likely to better understand the material. So we have that in place as well. We've actually gone out and hired a couple of very interesting individuals who do speak foreign languages as examiners, and they're helping us better see and hear and understand what's going on in some of our exam rooms around the state. The last thing I'll offer to you, sir, is for now is that there's, as far as I know, Maine 29A is silent on any authority for us to deal with cheating. We have authority per here and other Maine statutes to deal with fraud, to deal with misstatements of fact, both criminal and non-criminal. Cheating is not an idea addressed that I'm aware of. So I have no authority, nor does my team have an authority to do anything other than administrative penalty of your test is canceled. And at some point they'll reapply, and then we ask them to pay another fee, and then we seek them for another test. But law requires us to offer that service to somebody that's legitimately entitled to it that comes forward. So I think that's an interesting thing the Transportation Committee might want to wrestle with. And I know we would certainly love to be part of that conversation, is what recourse does the Bureau have if cheating is detected that doesn't meet that criminal level? What authorities can we talk through and work through to deal with that in the future? Because right now I believe I don't have anything other than rescheduling.
Representative Lemon, I will defer. I'm going to ask you to defer until I get through one more round of questions, unless it's directly related to. Great. Then you may proceed, sir.
Could you explain to me the difference between fraud and cheating? Because where I come from, they're the same thing.
Yeah. Not a lawyer, sir. So I take your point, and we can go back and look back through this and provide you some better explanation. What I will offer is that from our perspective, fraud involves statements, misstatements, deliberate attempts to mislead. When it comes to taking an examination, I don't believe that falls underneath the definitions that we have available to us right now. I'll take that away.
Yeah.
We'll go do some more research. I take your point, sir. I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. The chair recognizes Senator Dusan.
Thank you. So my own personal proclivities are, my hackles are raised by what is beginning to sound like a presumption of malfeasance if you happen to speak another language. I'm wondering if we, and I'm not saying that that's what you're doing, it's just a conversation, it's kind of generating that in me. I'm wondering if you track pass rate data for any other category of applicants. For example, is the pass rate for applicants who have participated in a driver's ed class, is that pretty close to 100%?
So to answer your first question, ma'am, we do not break down pass rate statistics by demographic category of any variety, whether that's geographic or age or anything else. We have some ability to do that, but we do not actively track that, to answer your question. Your second question on driver ed, I can look. I don't know that we have readily available at first time pass rates on the exam for students coming out of driver education schools. If the student does not pass, then the school has the ability to reissue that exam, and then they declare to us when that student has passed that exam, and that's when we make them eligible for the permit. So that's something I can go back to my driver ed unit manager and see if we have that data readily available. I imagine it's because we get most of our documents from driver ed schools via paper. That would be something that would take us a while to generate, to get you that statistic, but we can go look.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I
may
was
proceed.
made curious and posed that question because I thought you agreed to go see if folks who are immigrants, asylum seekers, to investigate whether there was indeed 100% pass rate. And I'm not sure what category of applicants that was, but so.
Yes, ma'am. Fair clarification in that, in general, we see that most immigrants come to us to pursue the driving privilege above the age of 18. And so per Maine law, then they are not required to complete driver ed. So they take their written test to earn their permit by coming into the Bureau of Motor Vehicles and taking a test in our exam room with our examiners. An immigrant under the age of 18 would be required to complete driver ed. But there is a distinction there with it. There's a data set within that data set.
Stipulating all of that. Unless I misunderstood a conversation that happened a few moments ago with my colleague, Representative Lemelin, I thought you asserted that you would have the ability to check on whether folks who were not born here, who are pursuing a driver's license, I thought you said there was a way for you to check on whether there was 100% pass rate now. So I'm struggling with framing how exactly my colleague presented that category of people who somehow someone else said have 100% pass rate. But I thought you said that you were able to check on that.
I think that we said we would see if there was data available to determine the pass rate for people that used interpreters. I don't know if that data is available, but we'll see if it's available. So.
Senator.
Thank you very much. I think my point is made. I think that if that data is available, I would wonder under what circumstances we're gathering data on this particular category of people and no other category of people.
Yes.
Senator, I understand your question at this point. We have data that we gather through the course of doing business. So for every exam that we issue, you have the ability to tally up the number of exams we issued, who passed, who failed. For every road test, we have the ability to tally up how many people fail for failure to stop at a stop sign. I mean, we have all that information available for that and many of our other programs. So then the question is going back into that data and then looking to marry that up against other pieces of data. You know, are they from Aroostook County? Are they over 21? Are they limited term non-citizens? I mean, so that's it is not something that we actively track. I think if that's your concern, ma'am, is we're not out there looking and monitoring to follow certain slices of Maine, but we have that data in our system and can go parse it and report upon it, if that addresses your concern.
Thank you. Representative Lee next, followed by Representative Perkins, Senator Garin, Senator Timberlake, and Representative Lemlin. So everyone can
have a clarification.
Representative Lemlin, your clarification question?
Yes, I just want to clarify, not a question. I just want to clarify something. The statement that I made about the 100% passing is an examiner that worked for you for multiple years that is now retired, came forward as a whistleblower and stated that in his term, there was 100% passage for undocumented immigrants, whereas it was 65 to 70% for everybody else. Just for clarification, okay?
And that is the question that I asked for verification on, because people can say anything. What I'm wondering, though, is that a non-citizen 100% pass rate does not break down who those non-citizens are, where they permits, whatever. And so I'm beginning to wonder if there needs to be simply the agency looking at their records to see if they can verify or refute for a follow-up briefing any information regarding this former whistleblower employee around this particular issue.
I can explain to you, under the prior Secretary of State, there was a complaint and it was investigated. And the investigation revealed that there was not substantial evidence to prove those allegations.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Representative Lee.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today, and also thank you for the thoroughness and detail of your response. It's one of the best since I've been on GOC that I've seen, because it actually gave us the details of the cases that are referenced in the issue being brought forward. I'd also like to thank Representative Barada and Senator Bickford for bringing this issue forward. I think it surfaced a few policy issues for the Department of Transportation as well as the Transportation Committee. I don't think any of those have anything to do with the immigration status of the individuals involved here. They were both legally present and appear to have legally obtained the permit and license that they had applied for. The issues that I do think this surfaces is one that I've consistently seen in the state of Maine is pedestrian safety, which is highly problematic in our state and one that is not served effectively. And the two tragedies here demonstrate that. Another, to me, appears to be the issue that you surface, sir, which is the inability of your under 29A for you to find cheating and to deal with that cheating. And so I think that's certainly an issue that the Transportation Committee should take up. And the third issue that I think is surfaced is one that exists in the first case, and I'd kind of like to ask some questions about that first case. It's certainly easy, irrespective of whether someone has an interpreter, to cheat on written exams. I think we all know that from elementary and middle school and high school. It's incredibly difficult, however, to cheat on the driving exam. And so one can obtain a permit without taking a driving exam, correct?
You must pass a written exam either in person at BMV or through a licensed driver education school in order to earn a driving permit. Sorry.
But you need to have demonstrated no capacity to actually drive
That's
with
correct.
any sort of a driving exam.
Yep.
And so I noted in your letter, you said that first driver lacks significant driving practice on Maine's roads. And can you give me a little detail of what someone needs to, what limitations exist for someone who's on a permit rather than a license?
The statement that you reference in the letter, sir, was simply referring to the number of days between being permitted to operate a motor vehicle in the state of Maine and the fatal tragedy that they were involved in. And so there's no expectation that anybody would have that opportunity to gain that level of skill in that amount of time. 6 months is generally the going standard on what it takes to actually reach a minimum level of safety in terms of being proficient, with a certain number of night hours as well. For our younger drivers, there's a 70-hour mark that's set as well, which includes the 10 hours of driver ed and 10 hours of night within that 70. But those are, I think, reasonable standards that we use to measure before we set somebody up for that road test.
I guess my question is, was there some level of supervision that's required for someone who's on a permit rather than a license?
Yeah, absolutely, sir. So if you're a permitted driver, you're not empowered to operate that motor vehicle on your own. You must have somebody in the right seat, right, who's got 2 years of experience of their own, that has an active license that's not suspended, and meets a minimum age requirement as well.
Okay, and
You may proceed.
in this case, and I don't know if there's an active investigation and to what extent you can comment on it, but was this individual subject to those supervision requirements and not operating with a supervisor?
So I've not yet seen, nor do I believe the investigating law enforcement authorities have completed a formal Maine crash report.
Yep.
Which is a public record that we also reference that gets that officer's assessment of what actually happened in that crash. We have a first report of a fatal crash that we get through the law enforcement network that tells us to be mindful and start watching how those crashes progress and unfold. So we know there was a driver in the right seat of that crash.
Okay.
But we don't have any other information right now other than the fact that the crash occurred. This was the driver, and then this was the passenger in the right seat.
Okay. Again, thank you for being here, and I think that really does surface some important issues that transportation should consider.
Thank you, Representative. Chair recognizes Representative Perkins. And Senator Tipping, you are in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So thank you both for being here. In listening to the answers to some of the questions that have been posed to you, it's prompted some of my own. And knowing that the requirements that for documentation are a rulemaking thing rather than a statutory thing. And prior to this meeting, I went and looked up what some of those required documents might be. And there's some of them were pretty vague. I mean, it got to the, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's pretty much anything the Secretary of State deems she can verify is a legal status for being in the state that the Secretary of State would accept. So I was questioning if someone, because there has been a change in the way that the federal administration is handling immigration violations, where in the last few years, someone who may have been found in this country unlawfully may have been just given a court date at some number of years in the future and said, okay, here is your court date. And where now maybe they might be removed from the country a little more expeditiously. Does your department count a summons to a court as a valid documentation for legal presence in as authenticated to issue them a permit to operate in the state of Maine?
All of the documentation that we require does have to be issued by the USCIS.
And
We
if
would
I'm
have to
wrong,
look
but
up a specific, if, we have to look up a specific number of a form. I don't see it unless you see it, Chris.
if I'm wrong, I'd be happy to be wrong on that, but I was pretty sure looking at the Secretary of State's website and also downloading the PDF that a summons to a court date was enough to be considered a legal presence in the state of Maine, even if the summons was for a removal process. Can you check on that and
Yeah,
return
we'll
that to the
check
committee
on
for
that.
me?
Absolutely, sir.
And I think it's important to note that if the legislature feels that there should be more in legislation, that's a policy decision. The Transportation Committee could provide that guidance to us through legislation. We're happy to work with, and happy to comply with any of the laws that are passed.
Oh, and I understand that, but what I'm saying is based on your current rules, that is what I'm asking. And second, you mentioned something about, you're issuing the privilege to operate in the state of Maine based on a EAC. And then you also mentioned upgrades to real IDs. Have you issued real IDs based solely on someone having an EAC?
Give me a second, sir. I'll flip here to the list of documents that the federal government allows us to reference when issuing or issuing a real ID.
Maybe I can ask another question and make it clearer. Are the requirements for a real ID for a US citizen in the state of Maine different than for someone that is either has a non-immigrant status or an immigrant status? Or do you require the exact same type of documents? I mean, are they equal documentation requirements?
The list of acceptable documents for the purposes of someone applying for a real ID, sir, are declared in federal regulation by the federal government, by the Department of Homeland Security that oversees the Transportation Security Administration, right?
Okay, so to your knowledge, you haven't issued the real ID based solely on an EAC or something like that?
We don't have any Maine specific requirements. We don't have a separate set of rules that we reference when it comes to real ID issuance for non-US citizens. We reference the federal guidance directly.
Okay.
And looking through this list of documents that the federal government allows us to reference for real ID, and the AD form I-766 or 63B is a document that will be used to establish legal presence for the purposes of real ID or federal guidance.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Representative. Chair recognizes Senator Garin.
It should just.
Try a different microphone.
It works. You just have to be really light. Turn yours on. Adam.
She won't be able to do it. I know they work.
Try.
So it's gonna work. So-
I was kind of hoping it would work. but it didn't.
From the government.
Thank you so much. I've got a couple questions. You said in one of your answers, you mentioned substantial evidence that cheating was taking place. What would constitute substantial evidence? Do you have a
That would-
standard for substantial evidence?
I would have to talk with our investigators on what they would consider substantial evidence. I'm not an investigator, so I couldn't tell you that. But we could provide that to you, what an investigation would reveal.
I think that would be important. And another question I have is related to the background checks. This is something I think would be necessary. You have interpreters coming in. It sounds from your testimony that you don't know what their qualifications are, that they have no background checks or references to become an interpreter, but it's such an important link in the permitting process is ensuring that this isn't because of a familiar relationship, if they're a friend, if they're a cousin, if they're being paid. What is the criteria you're requiring for these people that are the interpreters and who have, it seems to me, a very easy path to cheating? If there's nobody observing who can understand the language. Is someone sitting there and observing that is a neutral person? Because it doesn't seem like the interpreters don't seem to have the credibility of being a neutral actor.
All of our, all of the exams that we administer, Senator, are overseen by an examiner, by a state employee. But I do take your point that their ability to understand what's happening in a foreign language
Right.
is limited. I will tell you that we have had in recent conversations internally discussions about how we might establish a more formal, I won't say licensing for lack of a better term, but a program to vet the interpreters that are brought forward. I've not had a chance to walk that through with my boss or the secretary yet, but that's something that we are looking at. Theoretically, you could, Maine does license language interpreters for other functions, so that's something that we could peg it to. And then establish a program much like we license driver ed schools, we license dealers, vehicles and other things to establish a standard and hold them to that standard and regulate them. But right now that program does not exist.
So just to make this clear in my mind, there is no vetting process for the examiners at this point.
For the interpreters.
I mean interpreters.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Representative Strachio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that is a great follow-up because I had down on my list is because we have these not in statute but in rule, it's easier to change. We could require that interpreters be credentialed in some way. And because the truth is, we license to protect the public. So we need to be sure that all of those processes that are in place to get to that initial, that license at the end are all doing the job that they do to make sure we're vetting everything along the way. So I guess what I have a couple of things that I've noted, I'm sure you have too, is that, first of all, I never realized there were so many ways you could cheat getting a driver's license. Sorry, because when they first brought it up, I'm thinking, cheat, how can you cheat? But clearly there's ways for people to cheat. And it doesn't matter whether you're legally present here or been a Maine resident and went through the whole, cheating exists across the board. And also, once people have that learner's permit in hand or that driver's license in hand, it doesn't mean that they're going to renew it if they have to, and they're still going to drive. I mean, how do we catch people? We catch them when they have an accident or they get stopped for something. And then, because I see it in my town all the time, stopped and then driving without a license. So it clearly happens a lot, and it's not just people that are legally present here.
You know, one of the things that we recognize is that we we have authority over the testing process. But once somebody gets in the vehicle and they drive away, we can't be in every vehicle with every person. They make their own choices, they make their decisions. We hope that they're using good judgment, but sometimes people don't. And it's really unfortunate. I have one more.
You may proceed.
So, and just to make it clear to me, I know that if I wanted to drive a car in Europe, I would need to get an international driver's license. Can you tell me what happens if somebody's going to come to the States and let's just use, Europe and Italy, and they want to drive around the country. They're going to rent a car. What do they use for their license? How do we, and they're going to come to Maine, they're going to go to Vermont, they're going to go as far, and then they're going to fly out. They're going to come in on the East Coast and they're going to fly out on the West Coast. You tell me what happens to them.
Well, as long as they're not establishing residency, they can drive on their license from another country with the international permit, which is like an interpretation of their current license. They can drive on that for up to a year as a visitor in the state. But once they establish residency, once they get someplace to live, they have a job, then they're required to get a Maine license.
And that's no different than if somebody moves from New Hampshire to Maine, they have 30 days.
Correct.
To get
That
a
is
Maine
correct.
license.
That is correct.
And that has been an issue for us on a border town
Mhm.
of people coming from New Hampshire. And I've seen the cars in the driveway for a year of New Hampshire plates so we know that happens too.
We do.
I know, because we've actually sent people out
No,
to
and
drive around and say, you need to get a Maine license, but
they may have a Maine license, but they choose to have the New Hampshire registration plates because the cost of a Maine registration is significantly higher than a New Hampshire registration.
and the requirements for insurance.
And the requirements for insurance.
Right. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. Chair recognizes Senator Timberlake. Thank you for your patience, sir.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. Been listening very diligently here and a lot of great questions, and I really appreciate the department being here to answer the questions. I'm here to try to find a solution to a possible problem, whether it's a problem or whether it isn't. One of them, my question was answered was, is there an examiner in the room when the test is given? And it was answered, yes, there is. I guess my question I ask is the test recorded in any way? Is it videotaped or recorded? And I'll follow up with the last one. Then I got one more question after that goes on to Real ID. In today's world with AI and the ability to have, you can buy earpods now that'll interpret about any language. Has the department thought about being able to give the examiners earpods that they can wear? It doesn't tell them how to speak it, but they can understand everything that is being said in the room at the time. Has there been any thought to we just supplying earpods that do the interpretation from all the different languages to help out with this problem? I mean, to me, it sounds simpler if the examiner could hear exactly what the interpreter was saying. Those are my two questions there, and then I got one more after that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Yes, Senator, good morning. We do not record video or audio in our exam rooms. We record the results of the examination with one exception, which is our digital testing system. So the exams that are in the computer when people come forward to take those tests does have a camera that takes occasional snapshots of the individual. And that allows us, as part of a fraudulent, question later on, if we need to determine who was that person that took that test, was that person who they said they were, to be able to then have a photograph of who actually was sitting at the computer taking that written exam at that time. But it's not a running recording, nor is it an audio recording, Senator. And then to your point on the Real ID, that there are a number of different technologies available to, we do offer and train our staff to use Google Translate on their state cell phones. It facilitates a number of different conversations, whether that's in the parking lot trying to examine how the road test, discuss how the road test is going to go, or debrief the road test. It also facilitates the check-in process. We do not use it real time during a road test, but it is a tool that our staff has available. And I take your point that there are potential other applications for those kind of common off-the-shelf technologies.
Well, I would just think, excuse me, Mr. Chair, is it okay if I continue?
You may proceed, sir.
I would just think, you know, as a solution to the problem, it's not a very inexpensive one, is that if we supplied the examiners in the room that were giving the permit test with ear pods, they could hear it as it was happening and hear the questions in Google Translate I've used, and you got to wait for it to happen and read, and then you got to keep up with it. And the ear pods, if you've ever used them, are actually very slick. I got them in now, and you hear the same thing as they're speaking, and it's translated right over into English. I would think that would be something that we look into in the future. And then you're going to probably say that's the legislature's problem or the transportation committee's problem, because they seem to be getting blamed for a lot today. They probably should be, because they're kind of slackers over there. But moving right along, Representative Perkins asked the question, and I didn't really think it got answered in a way that I understood it anyway. And it goes back to the Real ID. Has anyone been issued the Real ID using solely an EAC without providing a valid non-immigration visa or other USCIS documents that shows that they're here legally and not pending an immigration trial? Because yeah, I think as someone who's got a brother-in-law who dealt with immigration law quite a bit, and he beats it into my head quite often, I wondered if we were using all the documentation required by the federal government or just a portion thereof.
Sir, we have issued, well, I will say with relative certainty, we have issued Real IDs based on an EAD, work authorization document, because it's listed in the list of acceptable documents from TSA. I will offer that the other thing, as we pointed out in the Secretary's letter this morning, is that the federal regulations on Real ID require us to query the federal immigration database using a system called SAVE, the Systemic Alien Verification of Entitlement System. So our staff then takes the document that is provided by the applicant, logs into that online database, enters the information on that document, at which point SAVE then provides a reply to demonstrate that A, that document is valid, and B, that person is legally present in the United States or not from the perspective of the federal government. And that Real ID is a federally regulated program. We rely on federal regulations. We use the federal system. So it is a higher standard than the main state standard, but that's how we backstop the fact that the backstop and validate the credential provided and that it's meets the need.
So
Thank you, Director. Senator,
may I just follow up real quick, Senator?
you may proceed.
Thank you. I just trying to clarify in my own head, because I'm not an attorney. I'm a farmer, and I'm trying to understand exactly what you just said. I'm trying to clarify if we're using all of the standards that the federal government requires, or if we're only using the work document, the EAC standard, versus doing everything that the federal government requires, because there's been some conversation around that, and I'm just trying to verify. I have no idea if it is. I'm not making any points that it isn't. I'm trying to clarify to make sure we're following exactly what the federal government is requiring us in order to issue the Real ID, because I think Real IDs are very important, that they're issued and they go through all of the proper process, because it determines whether you get in and certain out of in and out of certain places that are very important.
Yes, sir. We absolutely share your concern about the seriousness of issuing Real ID on behalf of the federal government for all the reasons that Real ID is a required document in different places in the United States. I guess if I can offer you any assurance, we were inspected by the Department of Homeland Security and the Transportation Security Administration this fall. They wire brushed our program and gave us extremely high grades. So this was not anything that they had flagged. They looked through many records. They visited us. They talked about our program. So well, I will never sit here and tell you 100% that anything does or does not happen. I'm confident that we're doing the right thing on a recurring basis.
Director Eileen, you used a phrase that is new to me, wire brushed.
Wire brush.
Our program, what does that
We were
mean?
given a thorough evaluation of the various aspects of our Real ID.
Is that like a
program,
toothbrush
so-
cleaning or
A
something?
really deep.
I just have never heard that before.
Use a wire brush.
I appreciate.
Looking for
probably
rust,
have, but-
looking for layers of rust. Yes,
Got
yes,
it.
sir.
There we go. The chair is always willing to hear new phraseology for certain things that he may or may not be familiar with. And with that, the chair recognizes Senator Tipping.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm doing some wire brushing later today on some old axe heads, so appreciate the metaphor. So I just wanted to ask a couple of quick questions. Would note that the initial concern here was about folks not legally present. I think that was very well addressed by the department in the letter. We're now hearing some different concerns that are somewhat tangentially related. There was this allegation of passage rates by undocumented immigrants, which appears to be false, as we've clearly established that only documented folks can take the exam. And we've also heard of allegations that were made, investigated, found to be lacking in evidence. Now we've heard about this wire brushing. The processes were recently audited by the federal government. So I guess I'm just interested maybe in the overall status of all this. Are you aware, first of all, of any evidence and differences in accident rates based on immigration status?
We don't have any data on that.
Okay. And are
May
you
be
aware,
available, but I don't have any.
are you aware of any systemic cheating or gaming of the system by anyone, including those who speak English as an additional language, or people from New Hampshire, or members of the Transportation Committee, or anyone?
I think we told you earlier that we did we did believe that an imposter was taking a road test earlier this summer. And as soon as we discovered that, we reported that to the authorities, which we would do whenever we are aware of something that should not be happening, that's fraudulent. We would take action, whatever the authority, based on whatever authority we have, whether it's criminal or not.
Well, thank you. And I'm sure the questions today and in the letter are asked in complete good faith, but I just want to recognize that this conversation is taking place at a moment where there is rampant, unfortunate, and usually false or confused anti-immigrant sentiments being expressed. And I just want to commend the professionalism of the department right now. And I also want to note, at least on my behalf, and I hope on behalf of the committee as well, that we are a nation and a state of immigrants. We welcome people from other places to Maine, and we absolutely appreciate their contributions to our state.
We appreciate your recognition of our professionalism. We are very proud of our organization and the ability for our organization to comply with the laws and rules of Maine and the federal government. So thank you for that compliment.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Representative Lee, followed by Senator Dusan and Senator Farren.
I was just doing some digging into 29A. Am I correct that someone who is hearing impaired is entitled to an ASL interpreter for these tests?
Yes.
That's actually part of the federal American with Disabilities Act compliance requirements.
Okay. And are there any concerns about cheating with regards to those who are having ASL interpreters with them?
I've not been made aware. It's a relatively smaller percentage of the population.
Okay. I'd also note as to I appreciate the work that you all are doing to try to maybe put some parameters around who's able to be an interpreter. And I commend you to look at sort of the judicial branch who has a roster of licensed interpreters. They seem to have a fairly good process as it's set forth to make sure that those individuals have been vetted and have some capacity to do the work.
Thanks for that recommendation.
Thank you, Representative. The chair was in error. The chair will now recognize Representative Lemlin.
Thank you, Senator. For the record, my questioning, and I know my colleagues' questionings, have nothing to do with anti-immigration. My wife's an immigrant. And it's not an attack against your department in any way. We don't think you're doing anything shady in the least bit. What it is we have a whistleblower who's come forward. He's here today, and he has brought to our attention concerns. And there are 5 other people who work in your department who are willing to testify under oath that there's problems. All we want to do is try to get down to the facts to see if there is a problem. I'm not saying you even know what's going on, but it would be nice if you found out and if we could correct it. And that's all we're trying to do here. I have 2 statements before I ask my couple of questions. One is I asked one of your examiners about the Google Translate. He was told that they were told that they could use it for road test, but not for the permit examinations because there's an interpreter in the room, and so you don't need it. So a recommendation might be to look into the fact that maybe we need to suggest to these examiners that they could use it during this time, even though there's an interpreter in the room, just to eliminate a possible chance of that person cheating, because there's no way I'm going to understand language from another country. And the second thing I asked this examiner is about the earbuds, and he indicated that that's probably not going to work in an exam room because, as you know, there's multiple exams going on. So you understand why that may not be and he recognizes right away that would be an issue. Great idea, but an issue. So back to my questions. As far as the fraud part, if an interpreter is signing this form, the MV-81, stating that they're an interpreter basically with integrity, and now if they were cheating, wouldn't that be a form of fraud? So that's my question for you for later. I know you can't answer that now. And then, does every non-citizen have to provide a photo ID to prove that it's them at the time? Or do they just have to prove documentation? Like you showed, documentation that they can, they have an H-1B. Well, an H-1B, I know my wife had one. That doesn't have anything that proves that my wife is Dr. Kelly Lemlin. It just says that she has a permit to work here. But Gail could have gone in with that. So do you ask for photo ID? That's my first question.
Sir. Yes, sir. Thanks for the comments and the question. On the Google Translate, we've been, I think, pretty clear with our team that it's not to be used during a road test, just from a safety perspective. I do take your point on that. If nothing else, there are transcription tools. And while it may not be real live interpretation for the examiner proctoring the exam, but you could get a transcript off a discussion and then be able to look at it later on and actually have then a document to, substantiate an investigation. So there are things that we look at, whether they're earbuds or not. So those suggestions are extremely helpful. And I do owe you the comeback on the cheating and the MV-81 question. We do not require a photo ID as part of the immigration documents that are provided from non-citizens. We also do not require a photo ID the first time a U.S. citizen pitches up to BMV to apply for a state ID or a
Really?
license. A birth certificate can be provided.
You don't find that problematic?
Sir, it's curious. I mean, that's the way our nation establishes identity, is on that first source document is often not accompanied by a photo. So what do we, so that's where our system kicks in, and we do things like we check, we require that you bring forward your social security number, and we electronically verify that name and social security number pairing with the Social Security Administration through their database. We do a number of other checks to try and substantiate and really establish that identity. The Bureau of Motor Vehicles is the main state default identity agency, as is the motor vehicle agency in every state in the union. And so that we take that extremely seriously. And the number of things that our staff have to go through before we let somebody across the line and issue them that credential, license or ID, real ID or not, is we work our level best. We take nationally vetted annual fraud detection training. Our staff does, myself included, to make sure that we're up to date on what fraudsters are doing. But yes, the bottom line is, Mainer or not, immigrant or not, there are moments where an identity is established without a photo ID.
Okay, I find that to be problematic. I think that's something I'm gonna have to look into. Thank you, though.
Yes, sir.
When your department's done an investigation, and you said that if a person brings in a complaint, you investigate every one of them, correct? Do you investigate every complaint? If I'm an examiner and I come to you with a complaint that I think somebody just cheated on the test, that the interpreters are cheating, you fully investigate that, correct? Every single complaint?
There's different levels of investigations. We have a whole law enforcement team that does criminal investigations. We listen to our staff. We take into consideration what they're telling us. When people make very broad statements, for example, all immigrants are cheating, that probably wouldn't be investigated.
That's
So
understandable. Okay.
If I may, sir,
Yeah.
The vast majority of examiner concerns that are raised do make it to my level. And the chain of supervision, including the chief examiner and his examiner supervisors that sit below him and the examiner force, do look into every complaint or concern that's raised. They don't all necessarily make it to the level of asking one of the boss's badge wearing detectives to actually formally investigate it, but we do look into them.
I just have two more real quick questions. The first one is, you document every complaint, whether it's, even if a person comes up and says, hey, I think all the immigrants are cheating, which I agree with you. If a person makes that statement, I'm going to brush that off like dandruff. But you still document that they made the complaint, and you also document, when it gets to your level, you document that you have looked into this, correct? So all that documentation is available to us?
I don't know, quite often we'll take notes of conversations that we have with employees. They're not kept for a long period of time. I couldn't tell you how long we have conversation notes. Yeah.
Typically, examiners will write those things up, and often we'll ask them to write up what happened. And a state email by a state employee is a record.
Okay, last question. If you've got a complaint, which I know you have several of them, but when you get a complaint and it's not vague, it's crystal clear. I just had an interpreter. I feel they cheated. Could you find out for me if whoever investigated this, whether or not they actually went to an examination with that particular person and brought their own translator in to confirm whether or not something hoki's going on here?
I would also follow up on that and make a finer point. And we have already had discussions about whether or not there needs to be more proper vetting period of the interpreters. But if a person doesn't understand the language, how can an examiner assert that someone is cheating? Do you have any idea how that would work? If the examiner doesn't understand the language, why would they automatically assume an interpreter is cheating if they don't know what's being said? Can you tell me how that works? Representative Lemon, this is a question for the Office of the Secretary of State. Because I'm assuming that they have been in conversation with examiners about this over the course of time since these allegations seem to be.
That is the challenge. And we have had examiners say, well, the sentence should have taken a longer time to read. So therefore it was only a fewer words were used than in the sentence length in the English language. And so therefore they must have been giving them the answer. Well, some languages use fewer words for a sentence, to interpret a sentence. So the number of words a person uses to interpret an English sentence doesn't, in my mind, constitute cheating. I don't know if that particular language takes 10 words or 4 words to say that sentence.
I have been told, for those who do the work, that there is a difference between translation and interpretation. So an interpreter may not translate the English word for word, but will interpret what the English means to the individual so they understand the meaning of the sentence or the concept that's being asked about. Do your examiners, are they trained on the difference between the two things?
We have provided training that translation is a written document and interpretation is verbal.
Okay.
We've provided that training. We have provided other training to be sensitivity training, explaining different the difference between translating and interpreting.
Okay.
And you're getting to the point that I was trying to make, that an interpretation can be fewer words than a translation. And so therefore, when people say, well, they only said a few words, so therefore they must have been cheating, I couldn't use that as a basis for for an allegation.
How do you respond to an examiner that says that to you? Or Mr. Ireland, if you would like to respond to that, is there a dialogue internally around that itself?
Yes, that exact conversation took place. Okay. Thank you.
And can you say how often that happens?
I personally have probably 2 or 3 in 4 years.
And you mentioned earlier, Deputy Secretary Curtis, that there was an investigation into allegations made under a prior Secretary of State, and nothing was found to be substantiated. Do you have a record of that investigation that you are able to share with this committee?
Yes, we do. We have a record of that. Yes.
Okay. And I would think that the committee would like to at least see that investigation and its results, so we can determine if we believe that it was thorough enough for the purposes of this conversation. I will defer. The chair recognizes Senator Dusan, if she still has a question or comment to make.
thank you for your thorough response to the letter of inquiry that you received. You not only responded to the questions outlined in the letter, you also were very specific about the two circumstances that were highlighted as areas of concern. And I think that the detail in your response, from my read, makes pretty clear that while these were indeed horrible accidents, they're not necessarily related to the immigration status of the two drivers. The letter, the inquiry that I voted yes on does not mention cheating. The word interpreter appears nowhere in the request from this committee, nor in the request from my colleague members of the legislature. So this conversation is so far beyond the matter that we presented to you to ask for guidance on, or to ask for you to detail your policies and procedures. And then we get to, I'm getting to a question. Then we get to a elongated discussion of what folks who self-designated whistleblowers have alleged in, I'm not sure how many layers removed conversations. And I have difficulty with, there are some basic things that a whistleblower needs to do. One is actually complain about something specific. They don't have to put their name on it, but they need to complain about something specific. And in order to have this committee examine these questions that were not raised, we should at least have a letter of allegations or concerns or suspicions from a member of the GOC. That's the practice. Then you have the opportunity to respond to the GOC based on a specific set of concerns versus kind of being blindsided by it when you come in. So I wish to object to the broad scope of this conversation without the opportunity for you guys to actually go and do some examination for us, or to ask our staff to clarify what the area of examination is. My question is a couple of things that have been raised by this broad conversation. One is, so we've been talking about permitted drivers, and in the woman on the street vernacular, to me, that means learner's permits. Yes? Am I making the right leap? And that learner's permit is for, did you say 6 months?
2 years.
2 years, during which the person is supposed to go out and practice driving. Do you collect any data on the number of permitted drivers? Because one of the gentlemen here had only been permitted for a week. Mm-hmm. Do you collect data on the number of permitted drivers who have an accident while they're on permitted status? That, if we had that, it would give us an idea of how big a problem we have. I'll stop there and see if you have a response.
Yes, Senator, we do have that data. Our system receives crash reports from the main crash reporting system and assigns them to a driver's record. So we would have the ability to data mine an answer to that question.
Okay. That if we have that information, it might provide context for a future inquiry, which I presume we might do on the basis of a letter requesting the GOC to inquire. On interpreters, do we have any idea, did either of these drivers have an interpreter present during their request for a driver's license? I haven't heard anyone allege that interpreters was an issue in these two matters.
Both drivers had an interpreter with them at the time they passed the written
At
test.
the time they passed the written test?
Yes, ma'am.
And then after they passed the test, so going to the driver who was licensed for quite some time, the second driver, driver number 2, when they do the renewal, that's pro forma, and there's not a interpreter needed or required, or not the opportunity for them to request an interpreter.
There's always an opportunity for any customer to request an interpreter, Senator. We have, whether that's on the phone, we can dial in interpretation service live. Staff at our counters at our branches can ring up an interpreter, and now you're doing the phone across the counter, but it is always an option available to any customer at no cost to the customer.
And that's consistent with the availability of interpreter services across many state government agencies. That the agency, on request from the person coming in for the service, would have to provide an interpreter. And those interpreters are fully vetted and on and on and on. Okay. So moving to again, on the second driver, who after several renewals sought an upgrade to a real ID. Did I understand from your letter that when you upgrade to a real ID, there's a requirement that you submit the person's name and credentials through the SAVE system?
Yes, ma'am.
And that happened on this occasion?
It did.
Okay. I'm looking to see if I asked you all my questions. Thank you for your patience. If you were to receive a request based on, so I get calls from my constituents all the time, and I fully respect and appreciate that. Sometimes that's the only system where our constituents only feel safe calling someone who they think they know. And so, but if I were to then present allegations from a whistleblower through this committee, you would have the ability to go and look up the cases. For example, go back to see if there was that complaint, as Senator Hickman just asked. That would not be out of character or something outside of what your system does.
We want to be very transparent and welcome any investigation that this committee does. We would do everything we could to fully comply with the requests. Whatever data we have, we would provide to you. We have a very old computer system that we're modernizing, and it doesn't capture everything. So to the best of our ability, we would provide any information that you are requesting that we have the ability to do, to create.
Great. So I, for one, would be very happy to vote yes on examining these broader issues that were not necessarily in the original letter. I just have to say, and I appreciate my colleague Senator Tipping raising this discussion as well. From my perception, the current atmosphere, in the current atmosphere of people being pulled over, from my lived experience, it is driving while brown, or driving while wearing a hijab, or being pulled over and responding to the officer, perhaps a nice person who pulled you over, in a different language, or with an accent that makes clear that perhaps you speak a different language. Those are real issues and concerns for the safety of a large contingent of my constituents. And they're real issues in regard to safety for if my local law enforcement guys are involved in this, for their own safety, or for their own how to proceed fairly, which I believe my local law enforcement officers are very much committed to doing, how to proceed fairly. So this broad conversation just adds to this atmosphere of suspicion because you're brown. And so while I want us to follow the steps of looking into factual allegations, I have a real problem sitting through the conversation from this side of the table without giving you guys the opportunity to actually dig through your records or let us know if this is something we should be alarmed about. So I thank you for your presence and for your
Thank you.
very professional responses.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I have two more in the queue. Representative Perkins, followed by Senator Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one last time, just for my own peace of mind, and sticking as much as I can to our original area of concern, not and going back to the real ID thing. If I was a undocumented immigrant, and I wanted a real ID, would I be able to get a real ID?
Must be legally present.
Even if I had a work authorization? Somehow got a work
So,
authorization.
sir, I think the term undocumented is an interesting term.
Okay,
And so we don't give credentials to anybody that's not documented with something that
okay,
either
so
meets the
if
federal,
all I
state,
had
or
was
the
a work.
states. Yes, sir.
Okay, so if I was an asylee, if I was an asylum seeker and had only a petition for asylum and a work permit, would I be allowed a real ID?
So I'd like to go back and take another look at that. That's an interesting combination, and I don't know that I can give you a solid answer on that right now.
Okay,
I
So-
think our solid answer is we comply with the real ID requirements. That's what I can assure you. That, like,
well,
as
and
Director
I can
Ireland
understand that
said,
answer, but based on that combination of circumstances right there, I mean, you, off the top of your head, you don't know what those requirements are. Is that correct?
the list is very lengthy.
I
And I
understand that.
can tell you that every other state is complying with that list. I'm not aware of any state that would limit or like cross off anything that's on the list and say, no, their state can't use that combination of documents.
So to your knowledge, then, in the state of Maine, has anyone been given a real ID based on the combination of having a status as an asylum seeker and a work permit?
I don't have that answer for you right here, sir.
And final,
And I will just say, Representative Perkins, if they do have the answer and they bring it to us,
that would be.
it would be compliant with federal law. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So that situation, Representative Perkins, that you describe, if that's accurate and it has been happening, then it's because federal law allows for it. And if we believe that somehow that's wrong, we would have to reach out to our congressional delegation to have them change federal law. What is your final question, sir?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe that the first two examples I give, I don't believe would be compliant with federal law. The last one I'm about to give would be, and so I was just using it as a form of example. If I had, for example, an H-1B visa and applied for a real ID, would I be authorized for real ID under our current processes?
Yes, sir. I don't have that specific answer. with
Could
me.
you,
I'd have to
could you
take that
find
right
out
back.
for me?
Absolutely.
And also on the second example, could you find out for me if any have been issued under that circumstance?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
If any real IDs have been issued.
Yeah,
under this
correct.
amendment.
Real IDs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate that very much. And finally, the chair recognizes Senator Gary. Followed by Senator Farron.
Just a few more things I wanted to get clear in my mind, because I think we all want our roads to be safe. I mean, that's really
Absolutely.
what this whole thing is going back to.
Absolutely.
Who makes the decision on whether or not a cheating allegation is investigated?
That would be me.
Okay, and in the case of using the unvetted interpreters, what would you use as an example of an acceptable evidence of cheating that you would feel needed to be investigated?
I would want to be able to have it documented, that proof that that an answer was given to a person.
What would that proof be?
it's hard to say what that would be without having some circumstances, but in general, we would want to make sure that the allegation was specific, that we could document, we could look back, or we could look back at what the documentation shows us. We could look back at patterns. I think any investigation, it needs to be specific, and you need to be able to prove it. I don't know if I could list all of the ways it could be proven, because people are
Any-
using very
Can you
unique
list-
ways.
Are there any ways?
I'm sure there must be. I can't think of anything right. I can't, there has to be ways to prove it.
Are allegations submitted by an established procedure, like an online form, a verbal? How are allegations?
Employees, we would ask them to put their allegations in writing via email, most likely.
And if there was an allegation of cheating, would that application somewhere be flagged or noted on the application? Because we talked about, this is a place where identity is established, the driver's license. It comes to the point of getting that photo that is important in every aspect of American life. So we want to be sure we're not giving the photos to people who are cheating to get them. So is there a flag put on that application so that you could go back and say, if there wasn't a tragic accident, you could say, well, yes, that there was a flag on that and we need to investigate it further?
I think it'd be a very dangerous road to go down, to flag people's records based on an allegation.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Representative Lee.
I've been sort of looking at 6 CFR 37.11 since Representative Perkins first asked the question. And as I read it, it pretty simply answers that question about an EAD. It says, when the applicant presents one of the identity documents listed, and then it lists a few of those paragraphs, one of which is the one that is paragraph 5, which deals with EADs. It says, the issuing state's verification of the identity documents does not provide satisfactory evidence of lawful status. The applicant must also present a second document from that list of documents or documentation issued by DHS or other federal agencies demonstrating lawful status as determined by USCIS. And so all documents shall also be verified in the manner by another section of the code. So it's pretty clear that one presenting with simply an EAD would not be able to get a real ID. They would need that second form of documentation.
Thank you, Representative. Chair recognizes Senator Farron.
All right. 3 points, 2 points and a question. Point number 1, I can't wait to see what the chairs of this committee put together for a letter to the Transportation Committee on how much work we're going to have to do. That's going to be interesting.
Well, Senator Farron, I will cheat a little bit, pun not intended, and say that we have asked for the Office of the Secretary of State to bring us back a ton of information. And it would seem to me, not to get ahead of our committee process, that we would want to see what they bring us.
I was being tongue in cheek a little bit. Yeah.
Before we make a decision about what to do.
Yeah.
Because I don't mind, and the objection from Senator Dusan has been duly noted, but I don't mind the scope of anything going beyond the original letter, because that's what happens in front of this committee all the time. And we may find something we weren't actually looking for. And I believe that so much today has come forward that first the Office of the Secretary of State must respond. And then we will have another meeting where we can digest all of the things that are there. So what we might send to your committee is probably not going to be drafted today.
Okay, that's good.
How's that sound?
That sounds good.
All right. Please proceed, Senator.
Yeah. And just on the points of this conversation today, I understand what Senator Doosan was saying. I had some of those same concerns until we stay focused on the part of, especially the first driver. And what really piqued my interest was how quickly from that permit piece to the accident. And that's what I've tried to dive back into in my head with this interpreter piece, and whether we know this form filled out and whether there's some kind of systemic problem. And it could be, listen, one of the things that really bothers me when we have these difficult conversations, and it's automatically I hear about the world we live in and the climate that we're in. We're here trying to solve problems of two Mainers that died in terrible accidents and trying to figure out if there was a cause around that. It has nothing to do with the rest of the political environment. We're trying to get down to that. And it could come through this whole piece that the immigrant community doesn't feel that they have the resources, and so there's this pool of interpreters that they can only go to. I mean, part of this, we want to dig down into that process, and I think that's what we were asking to try to get there to do. And so my question, and this is the last piece of this, was if the Secretary of State's office wants to look at these earpods and maybe translation pieces and can help, look at making that more transparent, I'd be curious if there is a program out there that can convert Turner Farmer into legislative speak so we can understand what Senator Timberlake is saying sometimes.
Y'all are too many things.
May I
You may
comment?
respond, Deputy
Yes.
Secretary Curtis. Please and thank you.
I think that one area that we've missed today is that these very unfortunate crashes could have been caused by something completely different than the person's license. They could have been caused by a pedestrian not wearing reflective clothing. It could have been caused by something happening inside the car. It could have been caused by a person, the pedestrian doing something. We don't have that information yet. I will tell you that every fatality that happens in Maine, I review the police report, which sometimes the documents are 50, 60 pages long. And there are so many circumstances. A shadow on a street stopped a person from seeing a motorcycle in that shadow. There are just so many circumstances that could have contributed to these crashes. And I'll tell you, as Representative Lee brought up, pedestrian crashes are very much of a concern. Personally, I was a pedestrian hit in the street on April 1st, 1994. I was out of work for 6 months and took 2 years to recover, feel that crash every single day of my life. I know that it's important to look at pedestrian safety. It's also important to look at what did the pedestrian do? I was crossing the street where there wasn't a crosswalk. Two cars communicated to each other, and I thought they're communicating to me. So there are circumstances that can happen that have nothing to do with the driver's license or how they got their license. And let's not lose track of that.
I appreciate that, Deputy Secretary Curtis. We talk a lot about distracted driving, as we should. And Lord knows I wish our laws were stricter on that. And I'll leave it there for now. What we don't talk about a lot is distracted walking. And I do believe that there will be a generation of people whose necks are curved down and their fingers are smaller or bigger, depending upon which ones they use to text, because I have blown my horn several times at pedestrians who are not paying any attention to what they're doing. And I don't want to blame pedestrians in
No,
this case.
not at all.
I want to make that very clear. I have no idea what happened.
Right.
But people are walking and texting and they're not paying any attention to their surroundings. And I would imagine that if you're anywhere near traffic, that's just a dangerous thing for a pedestrian to embark upon. And so this is just for any pedestrian. Put your phone down while walking. It's not a bad thing to do. You might even see something you've never seen before. But we are now a culture of people across the globe that find it absolutely necessary to be on their black screens or they're Black Mirrors, as the Netflix show indicates, doing all sorts of things except for paying attention to what they're actually doing, which is walking from here to there. And so distracted walking, distracted cycling, distracted driving, it's all this thing, which is why I still maintain that a flip phone is the best deterrence from any of that because you can hardly see the screen, it's too small. So without saying everyone should get a flip phone, for the purposes of safety across the board, I am appreciative of your acknowledgement that fatalities are complicated and they're not always clear cut.
It's absolutely
And
correct.
they are under investigation
Yes,
and we don't have the results of
We
that
do not.
yet. This conversation I have appreciated very much because you do have a lot of data to bring us back. This committee does thorough work. We will take what you give us back and we will have another meeting about this issue because I do believe that other things have come up that deserve attention,
absolutely.
especially interpreters who have no accountability because the system doesn't require it at this time. And I don't know that anyone here thinks that that's a good idea for anything, whether it's issuing a driver's permit or being in a court representing a client who cannot speak the language. So we do have to look at that at the very least. Not your job to do that, but we are asking you to bring back as much information as we have asked you to do. I know that our staff has taken robust notes. And so when we bring this up again, we will be able to clarify the direction that this committee would like to go, as well as directing the Transportation Committee to do the policy work that's needed to be done on the other issues where there can be a robust public hearing and folks, the alleged whistleblowers, they can all come before the Transportation Committee and talk about why or what should solve the problem that they apparently have witnessed over the course of time. In light of our schedule, I'm going to end this part of our agenda at this time. And again, I appreciate both of you coming forward prepared. And I know that you do have some questions that you're going to get back to us on, and we will take it from there. If you wanted to say anything finally, the chair would also welcome that.
We really appreciate the conversation today. We're pleased to be able to have it. We will do our very best to provide the data that you're looking for with what we have and look forward to bringing that back to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
The
you.
committee will be at ease. We were going to prepare for a public hearing, but we're going to take a 5-minute break since this was a robust conversation. So the committee will be at ease for 5 minutes while we set up for our public hearing.
5 minutes.
The committee will be in order. Welcome back to the Joint Legislative Committee on Government Oversight. The chair would ask for quiet while we open up our next agenda item, which is the public hearing previously noticed for 10:30 a.m. today concerning OPEGA's most recent report, which evaluated the credit for major business headquarters expansions. I know that we're going to hear from one of the businesses that has benefited from this because they were not able to be here for the initial report. And then we'll have general comment from the public. Those remarks must be 3 minutes or less, and they must be germane to the actual OPEGA report. So with that, the chair will open the public hearing on the OPEGA's most recent report, which evaluated the credit for major business headquarters expansions. And I will invite, and I'm sorry that your name has just escaped me, but please come forward and you sign in and you state your name and you tell us where you are from, and you can present your testimony to this committee. And we will keep a clock, but there will be time for questions and answers from the committee.
Thank you, Senator.
And please turn your mic on, sir. Thank you very much. There you go. It's on.
You're going to have to coach me through a lot of this. Thank you, Senator Hickman, Representative Mastraccio, and the honorable members of the committee. My name is Jeff Bauer. I reside in Portland, Maine, and I'm here representing IDEX Laboratories. I am the Vice President of Taxation. I really did not come with any prepared remarks. I very much respected and appreciated the work that OPEGA did on the report. I certainly thought it was thorough and appropriate, but really wanted to make myself available to any questions that you might have, and I'm happy to do so.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bauer. We appreciate your succinctness. Are there any questions from the committee? Mr. Bauer, from IDEX, which was the subject of this report. Seeing none. We appreciate you being here today. You sign in. And we don't have any questions, which is rare for us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else present who wishes to testify on this report from the public? If so, please step forward, sir. And you can write your name down and where you are from. And as is typical, please try to keep your remarks germane to the report that we have in front of us. And you will have 3 minutes or less to address the committee. And then there'll be time for questions if the committee sees the need to ask any. Yes.
Okay. My name is Albert DeMillo. I'm a retired CPA and 30 years experience in corporate taxation. I sent everybody on the committee an email earlier. I've got because you only have 3 minutes and it should take 3 hours to go through this. Just look at page 1 of that handout I gave you. The thing that you need to see, just use common sense. This tells you for the 5 years ended 12/31/24, IDEX had revenue of $16.8 billion. It had profit before income taxes of $4.6 million. It paid $695 million in federal income tax, $165 million in foreign taxes. It paid about $141 million in state income taxes to everybody except Maine. In Maine, it paid $0 for those 5 years. And in fact, under this credit, they got $2.3 million back. This is a very profitable multi-billion-dollar company, and they pay no taxes, and we give them money back. This credit makes no sense, and it's a duplication of a 2007 tax law change, which I brought up 3 times in 2017, 2018, and 2.5 years ago. I gave information to the Taxation Committee about this. What you need to understand is the way you allocate income to states. It used to be a very simple 3-factor formula: wages, sales, and property. And then in 2007, to incentivize companies to come to Maine and put property and wages in the state, we went to a single sales factor formula. And what that did was reduced IDEX taxes, my quick calculations, and Maine Revenue Service could confirm it, probably by about $95 million over the last 15 years. And here we are doing in 2017, we put in this corporate headquarters thing. And that is exactly the same thing that a single sales factor does for you. It basically says, instead of counting property and payroll, you just count sales. So if you put tons of people in the state and have huge buildings in the state, you don't have any impact on your taxes in the state of Maine. And in fact, because at the time, all these other states used other factors that not only made you pay no Maine income tax, it made you save state income taxes in all these other states. Because you got property that they count in Maine, so it's not in their state. So this was an absolute duplication. I made that clear to OPEGA. They were supposed to audit that, and they did not conclude that. And my professional tax opinion is it's exactly the same thing.
Thank you, Mr. DeMillo, for being here today and providing your testimony to the committee for review. Are there any questions from the committee? Chair recognizes President Lemon.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning. Wow. Yeah, it's still good morning. Thank you for being here and thank you for your testimony. You say here that a law change that enabled IDEX to get credits even though they failed to meet the 2017 law requirements. What are those law requirements and what part of them did they fail?
So in 2000, what happened was they changed the law in 2017 because IDEX was supposed to have all these employees in the Westbrook facility. And they said, well, we're actually talking about the change in not 2017, but the change in, maybe I'm confused with what you're talking about. There was a law change just recently.
Mr. DeMillo, so that we can make sure that you're answering the correct question. Representative Lemon, can you please rephrase the
It's
question?
on the first page here that I have with all your numbers, and then it says from attachment A, then below that, it says attached below is my 4/13/23 testimony. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, right after that, it says in parentheses, a law change that enabled IDEX, that
Okay.
statement in parentheses, could you explain?
Okay, so what happened is there was IDEX came forward and they proposed a law change that was LD, I don't have the number in front of me, but it was a 2023 law change. The 2017 law that created this corporate headquarters said you had to have certain employees at a headquarters, and the headquarters was in Westbrook, Maine. So in 2003, they weren't going to meet the number of employees in Westbrook. So they said, well, we had COVID and we didn't hire people. And oh, by the way, we hired all kinds of people in Scarborough who weren't corporate headquarters people. They were actually people in research and other areas. And the legislature just said, okay, we'll count those. The issue is, this idea of a corporate headquarters, that really doesn't mean anything. The whole idea of what we were trying to do in 2007, when Maine went to the single sales factor, said, we want you to come to Maine. We want you to invest in property in Maine, hire people in Maine. And if you do that, you will not pay Maine income taxes that are allocated because of your presence in Maine. It'll only be your sales in Maine. And because IDEX has less than 1% of their sales in Maine, you have to apportion that $1 billion of income for the year. And if you use just sales, it's 1%, say. It's less than 1%. I don't have that number. But if you had used the three-factor formula, it would have actually worked out to about 30% or 25%. And they would have had a huge tax liability. So that was what happened in 2007.
Mr. DeMillo, I think you have answered the question. You didn't agree with the law. You provided testimony to the committee.
I did not agree with the law change.
You did not agree with the law that was presented, the legislation,
Yeah.
LD 1313. You presented your testimony to the committee.
Yeah.
It's in the record.
Yes.
And the bill nonetheless passed.
Yes.
Okay. And I think that you have answered Representative Lemelin's question about what you meant when you said that there was a law change that enabled IDEX to get credit.
right.
And so it's clear to us you don't agree with that. Is there anyone else who has a question for the gentleman? The chair recognizes Representative Lee.
Yeah,
you make an argument, and I think it's a compelling argument against the legislation as it passed, as Senator Hickman was just saying. I can see those arguments. What we have right now is OPEGA's report, which has a couple of recommendations. The first of which, the legislature may want to consider other tools for providing incentives to single entities in the future. The second of which is the legislature may want to consider approaches to increase transparency around use of multiple incentives, which I think goes to your idea that these are perhaps duplicate incentives. And so I understand you don't like that piece of legislation. Had I been here, I probably would have agreed with you regarding those pieces of legislation. Do you disagree with OPEGA's recommendations as to what the legislature should do with?
Well, the problem with OPEGA was one of the criteria that they were supposed to look at is whether it was a duplication. In fact, I'm the one that pushed for that to go into the parameters. It wasn't there. And I'm saying,
I'm asking, so you're
saying-
looking backward, I'm looking forward. Do you disagree with OPEGA's recommendations going forward?
Yes or no, sir?
I don't disagree, but the issue is not disagreeing or agreeing. The issue is that they did not do a proper report that identified that this was duplication of benefit.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee for Mr. DeMillo at this time? Seeing none, we appreciate you being here today.
Okay.
Is there anyone else present who wishes to testify on OPEGA's report regarding the tax credit for major business headquarters in Maine? Going once? Seeing no further witnesses, the chair will close the public hearing. The chair will now open the work session on this report and invite the OPEGA analysts forward to help us with that. The purpose of this work session is for the committee to vote on endorsement of the report, to officially transmit the report to the Taxation Committee, and to decide what additional actions, if any, this committee would like to take regarding the report. Members do have a copy of the report and other related materials in tab 4 of our binders. Ms. Henderson is also here from OPEGA to answer any questions about the report or about the process. But first, the committee will take up endorsement of the report and transmit it to the Taxation Committee. Is there a motion to endorse the report and transmit to the Taxation Committee? Chair recognizes Representative Mastracchio.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? It's been seconded by Representative Lee. The motion was made by Representative Mastracchio. Is there any discussion of the motion to endorse the report and transmit to the Taxation Committee? Chair recognizes Senator Farron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'd just like to have a brief discussion. I heard obviously through the public testimony piece, right, that there was Mr. DeMillo had some concerns about that. It was beyond the legislature passed a law that happens all the time. People don't like that outcome and have to live with that piece of it. But the only thing I guess I'd ask for a little clarification, a little discussion is the point of being, stewards of the people's money and how these credits work is the discrepancy between the report and the interpretation that there's duplicity, right, between the credits. I just like to hear what OPEGA's thoughts are on that piece of it.
Thank you, Senator Farron. Please introduce yourself and you may answer the question. Ms. Henderson.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Jen Henderson, and I am an analyst with OPEGA. And I'm happy to take any questions the committee might have about the report. Senator, with regard to duplication, we did address apportionment briefly in the report, and I can point the committee to that. It's on page 11. It's the first full paragraph there, and it has a little blue call out box. And I think part of what we highlighted in that report is that certainly as a tax policy, Maine using single factor apportionment does provide benefits to a company that has a large physical presence here with a lot of out-of-state sales. We are not disputing that. We could see that is how the math works. We can also see that looking back through the public record, that's something that's been brought to the legislature's attention a number of times, starting when the change to apportionment occurred in 2007. But it seems to have been the will of the legislature that that is the tax policy that the legislature wanted to have in place. Given that, we did not come to the opinion that the two are duplicative. While they might be providing financial benefits to the same company, it didn't strike us necessarily as a duplicative program or two programs attempting to accomplish the same thing.
And after the vote, we can certainly have further discussion about the recommendations in the report, but thank you, Senator Farron, for at least getting that into the record. Any other discussion points on the motion to endorse the report and transmit to the Taxation Committee pursuant to statute? Seeing none, is the committee ready for the question? All those in favor of the motion, please indicate in the usual manner. It is unanimous. And is there any further discussion about the recommendations that OPEGA has made regarding this tax expenditure? Chair recognizes Senator Tipping.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In our last meeting, we discussed the potential of reporting out legislation from this committee addressing the data collection to increase transparency. I know we'd asked OPEGA if they had specific recommendations, but the chair helpfully reminded us that we can report out such legislation. I wonder if now would be an appropriate time to discuss it.
It is now the appropriate time to discuss whether or not this committee will recommend legislation for the full legislature's review based upon this report. Ms. Henderson, did you have an answer or did you want to remark upon Senator Tipping's comment that you may have some suggested language for a recommendation to the legislature if we were to increase transparency along this line?
Sure, Senator. We did recall that at the last meeting, Senator Tipping had asked if we could bring back some thoughts about what might be possible avenues to that.
Mhm.
And we did have a couple of ideas to share with you today, and then we're happy to flesh anything out or amend anything based on the committee's direction. The first was just to remind the committee that there is an LD that was carried over from last session, which is LD 1107. And I think you have copies of that in your binders today behind the blue sheet. Representative Mastracchio is telling me in
And
tab 4.
Tab 4, blue sheet. Thank you for all of these color codes for us to understand what we are looking at. So I'm going to my blue sheet behind tab 4, and this is LD 1107. An act
Yes.
to amend the tax expenditure review process that centralized incentive data collection. Please proceed.
Yes. So that LD, my understanding is that it was passed to be enacted by the House, but then carried over before it moved through the Senate. And you can see that that LD was proposing to make some other changes that this committee had talked about last session,
Okay.
including to strike some of the language about the expedited review categories that are no longer applicable because
Mhm.
expedited reviews don't exist anymore. But if you turn to section 5 of the LD, I believe it's the Incentive Data Task Force
Mhm.
there that may speak to this data recommendation, or is one way perhaps that this data recommendation could be addressed. So that is certainly available, and the legislature could pass that as one approach regarding the data recommendation.
Senator Tipping, did you follow or are you looking at section 5 of LD 1107?
I did, thank you.
And Senator Tipping, do you believe that when the legislature convenes, if we were to take this up, would this incentive data task force satisfy the policy that you are seeking to change?
I'd be interested in hearing from OPEGA if that would satisfy their recommendation or if they have other recommendations.
Thank you. Ms. Henderson, please respond.
I think unfortunately for me, it's not a super simple yes or no question because I think the task force could be a great step forward, but it's unknown at this point how much progress that task force could make in untangling all of the complications in trying to get centralized, readily available, standardized data that the legislature could use for oversight. But it certainly could be a productive step.
And is there a recommendation either in currently before the legislature that you might propose that would be maybe not a task force, but kind of direct data collection and collation?
I'm not aware of any others currently before the legislature, but in case the task force was not a direction that this committee was particularly interested in, we did draft for you just some very early language for a resolve that would be directing an agency to develop a plan for centralizing data and bringing that plan back to the legislature at a future date. So we can hand out the draft language for that. I'm sorry, I don't have that to share electronically
It's okay.
now.
Our copies are fine. And so this is also, well, I'll look at it when I see it before I say something out of turn. And thank you for drafting this for the committee's consideration. So I'll just read it into the record so that anyone who is listening and doesn't have it is short. Plan for centralizing incentive data resolved that agency selected shall develop a plan for centralizing data related to the use of business incentive. The agency shall solicit input from stakeholders, other state agencies, and any other party desired. On or before a certain date, the agency shall submit to the Joint Standing Committee of the Legislature having jurisdiction over some or all of taxation, economic development, government oversight committee matters, a report that contains suggested legislation to amend statute as needed to establish a system for centralized collection and maintenance of data related to the use of business incentives. The report must also include detailed findings, requirements, and recommendations concerning 1, the population of business incentives to be included in the centralized data collection system, the method by which will be made readily available to the legislature and the public to support oversight. That was 2. 3, systems for ensuring that data is complete and accurate. 4, any statutory, regulatory, or other barriers to centralizing data collection for business incentives. The committees may submit legislation related to the report to the 133rd legislature in a certain year. So this suggestion also requires a future action by a task force, for lack of a better word, that would bring recommendations back to the legislature. Senator Tipping, do you have any comment on that?
I really appreciate OPEGA's work putting that together. And I would say that that seems like a more straightforward way to begin to address this issue than the creation of a legislative task force, which, as we know, would have to go to that table and be funded. It seems like at least an initial report of what's available and what can be done directed in a resolve would be appropriate.
Chair recognizes Representative Stracchio, followed by Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So would this draft that we have in front of us, that would address the use of multiple incentives as well? So do you know what I'm saying? Like, so they could look at how we could also look at that data, because I think that's, for me, the thing that I would want to see if I was looking at a proposal for an incentive for a business, be able to see how many they took advantage of and what that really monetize it, and tell me what that's costing the taxpayers.
Thank you, Representative. I think the goal is that all of that data would then be in one place. And so at any point in time, you could look at that and see, drill down to see what are all of the incentives that business A is currently benefiting from. But if there's different language or different pieces that we could include in the resolve that would make that clearer for you or describe that differently, we could do
Yeah,
that.
You may proceed.
I don't, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that was your thought, because that's when I saw it, I thought, well, we could include basically anything that we've had questions about, that obtaining data, that we want to make sure that whatever we do, we're not going to come back and say, oh, where's the piece of, we can't do that when this committee, whatever iteration it is in the future, says, well, how come you can't tell us that? I think that for me, this is cleaner than waiting for a bill that for some reason is hung up in the Senate that I don't know why, that they carried over. I mean, I don't know. But I would like to make sure that we have something in place going forward that clearly we're not going to answer all the questions and make something happen in the short session. But I always hate to try to hold another legislature in the future to something, because it just seems that it gets lost. But I would really like something to come out of this committee. I think that that would have more effect and more success in carrying that forward over from this legislature to the next.
Understood. And so my question then for the policymakers on this committee is, what language shall we be, which agencies are we directing to develop this plan? Which other parties might be included in the brackets that are in this draft? And since I believe this is the first time that this committee is even considering this iteration of this committee is considering reporting out legislation, I'll just need a little information, probably from our director, or Ms. Henderson, about the process by which something like this gets transmitted to the legislature and goes onto the calendar for the legislative review. And if that's not a question that Ms. Henderson can answer today, we certainly can take this up again when we get more clarity about what the language ought to be before the committee takes a vote to report out legislation. Ms. Henderson?
I would certainly defer to the director to provide you further information. My understanding is that the path may change because it's a resolve. And so I could certainly bring back more information about that at a future date as well.
Yeah, the resolve is still an LD. It would become an LD under the reporting out requirements. I just wanted to know, and we'll talk to the director during his report about the logistics of getting this reported out. Representative Strachio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have just a couple of questions about when you put agency selected. Normally, I'd just say probably DECD. They do business incentives. I mean, you must have had some thoughts about, I just want to make sure that whatever we do is actually going to come to fruition and not be something that is impossible. So if it was DECD developing a plan for centralizing data, but that just, that's where the business incentives begin, but it's also tax. But so have you had thoughts about how this might be most effective?
I think that we had many of those same thoughts about there being this shared responsibility. And we have seen, talking to our peers in other states, that it is sometimes the Department of Economic and Community Development that is responsible for that kind of centralized data. And it is sometimes the Revenue Department in that state. And so it really seemed to us that we didn't have a recommendation regarding which would be appropriate, but that might be best left for policymakers to decide.
So it's either the Department of Economic and Community Development or the Maine Revenue Service are the two agencies that would perhaps be directed to centralize this data.
I think those are the ones that are currently most involved in most of the incentives that we get questions about from legislators, but certainly there could be.
Could they be jointly responsible for doing it? I mean, we do have other resolves that require joint agency work. Go ahead, Representative Strachio.
Because I'm thinking that what we always have is MRS coming in and saying, well, you told us to get the data, but guess what? We can't get it. And DECD, well, you told them they needed to give it, but so it would seem to me that you would have to have both of them involved. And because if you didn't, we'd end up with the same kinds of issues. What I don't want to do is come out with something that, well, we told you that we wouldn't be able to get you that information. You can put it there, but we can't get it for you. We have a lot of that going on. So I guess I would have to say that they would both develop a plan that had to relate to business incentives. That would be my hope, that it would be, they would both be involved. And then maybe they both be able to come up with something that actually would accomplish what we want.
Thank you, Representative. Any other thoughts from the committee on the subject at hand? Chair recognizes Representative Lee.
Representative Mastracchio asked exactly the question that I was going to ask and spurred exactly the conversation that I was hoping would occur. And it seems to me like it does make sense to make both DECD and MRS responsible for this report.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from the committee? Well, we need to work on the final language of this
Yeah.
before taking a vote. And so if people have any other thoughts about what this ought to look like, it is appropriate to put those in an email to the entire committee and to the director for inclusion in a draft that we can then look at and take up at a future meeting. Is that the wish of the committee at this time? Yes. I see no objection to that, and so we will move on. Thank you, Ms. Henderson, for being here and walking us through all of that. Now, we will turn to proposals from OPEGA regarding the next 3 tax expenditures scheduled for full evaluations. These 3 are the deductions for interest and dividends on state and local securities, the main earned income tax credit, and the credit for affordable housing. Before OPEGA begins evaluating these tax expenditures, it is the responsibility of this committee, in consultation with the tax committee, and after receiving public input, to establish the goals and metrics against which the expenditure's performance should be measured. Today, we'll ask OPEGA Senior Analyst Carrie Hojera to first walk us through the proposed goals and metrics and answer any committee questions. Then we will hear public comment related to the proposals. After today's meeting, our staff will communicate the public comment to the Taxation Committee and solicit that committee's input on the proposals. We will then be in a position to review the Policy Committee's input and vote on these proposals at a future meeting. So, Ms. Hojera, will you please join us to walk us through these proposals?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
As Senator Hickman just explained, I'm here to walk you through the proposed parameters for the next 3 evaluations of tax expenditures that we will getting underway. Just as some context and a reminder of where we are in this process, we have done limited work. So we have a basic understanding of these programs, and I will try to answer what I can, but just so you know, we'll have a much more comprehensive understanding once we've completed the evaluations. So first, you have before you the proposed parameters for the deductions for interest and dividends on Maine, state, and local securities. That's behind the yellow. I think this is tab 5. I'm not entirely sure. It is. So the federal government exempts from taxation interest, income, and dividends earned on most state and local bonds, and Maine also exempts that income from taxation through conformity. These deductions before you appear to exist to exempt from state taxation those state and local bonds that are not exempted at the federal level. During our initial research to get ready to propose these parameters, we were not able to identify what these state and local bonds that are not exempt at the federal level, but that the state exempts through these deductions are. And this was after talking to the state treasurer, talking to MRS, doing our sort of early research. We couldn't quite figure that out. And so while these have relatively low fiscal notes versus some other tax expenditures that we review, we still think it's worthwhile to do this review to try to get some basic understanding about what this category of bonds includes so that the state can consider whether this is still policy that you would like to have. So we think this sort of descriptive information might be quite useful. The goals and metrics we propose for this review, you'll note, are broader than is typical. And this really reflects the approach we think we would take in this evaluation. So, second, you have behind the green proposed parameters for Maine's earned income tax credit And Maine's earned income tax credit is built on the federal earned income tax credit and is a credit for low to moderate income workers and families that provides a percentage of the federal credit to eligible Maine taxpayers. Based on our background research, we propose the parameters that are on the backside of this document. And while these are not set in statute, sometimes helpfully there are goals and metrics in statute. These are, we think, pretty well supported by public testimony on Maine's credit and information on the purpose of the federal credit as well. And the third set of parameters we have for you is behind the pink. And this is for Maine's credit for affordable housing. Something I want to point out on the background portion of this, which is the first page, Maine Housing brought to our attention additional information for the background information. The document you have says that the credit is available for projects that qualify for the federal low income housing credit. And this is true, but there are two versions of the federal credit, a 9% credit and a 4% credit. And Maine's credit is only available to be used in combination with a 4% credit. So this clarification doesn't really impact the proposed parameters that are before you, but we wanted to assure Maine Housing that we will attend to that in our evaluation. And there, I believe here, if you have any further questions on that. And helpfully, the goals and performance metrics for the credit for affordable housing are in statute. So those are pretty straightforward and listed on the back of that page. And I'm happy to answer any questions or turn it back over to you for the public comment. And as a reminder, you'll get to see me again to discuss this in January.
Yes, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Chair recognizes Representative Strachey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to comment how nice it is to see on the credit for affordable housing that we did put that in statute, that it makes it a whole lot easier, doesn't it?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we appreciate you being here and we will see you in January. With that, if there is anyone present who wishes to comment on each of the proposals individually or to open comment on all three, which is what the chair will do, is there anyone present who wishes to comment on any of these proposals for review at this time? Please step forward. And the chair will open public comment at this time. And I will put the clock back up just to make sure everyone is treated fairly. You, as before, sign in and state your name. And if you represent an organization or anything like that. It is afternoon.
Could you turn your mic on?
And please turn the mic on. Thank you. Representative Liberty, beat me to it.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, Senator Hickman, Representative Mastracchio, and members of the committee. My name's Robin Wardell. I'm the Chief Program Officer at the Genesis Community Loan Fund, and I'm here today to talk on behalf of our Executive Director, Liza Fleming-Ives, who is unable to be here. But thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Genesis is a certified nonprofit community development financial institution, or CDFI, and we're working throughout Maine to provide loans and expert guidance that support both the development of new affordable housing and the preservation of existing affordable homes, particularly in rural regions of the state. My comments today speak directly to how Maine's affordable housing tax credit is being used to preserve affordable housing, whom it benefits, and why it is such an essential and cost-effective tool. Maine has over 7,600 rental homes that were built in the 1970s and 80s and made affordable through USDA's Section 515 mortgage programs. As these programs mature, the federal rental assistance tied to them can disappear. When that happens, longtime rural residents, seniors, working families, and people with disabilities may suddenly find that they cannot stay in their homes. And in many of our most rural towns, there are few, if any, affordable alternatives. To address this challenge, Genesis partners with the USDA Rural Development to help transfer these properties from private landlords to nonprofit organizations and local housing authorities. Buyers who will preserve and stabilize affordable rents and reinvest in the buildings. These transfers are complex and simply will not happen without a reliable, predictable financing tool. The state affordable housing tax credit is that tool. It is unique and non-duplicative. No other program in Maine is designed to support the preservation and improvement of USDA-assisted rural housing in this way. To date, Genesis has facilitated 5 successful 515 property transfers that used the state credit, preserving the long-term affordability of nearly 100 homes in communities including Thomaston, Mapleton, Orono, and Waldoboro. We've worked with organizations such as Volunteers of America Northern New England, Coastal Affordable Housing, the Housing Authority of the City of Old Town, and the Presque Isle Housing Authority. And the outcomes are clear. Residents who feared losing their homes have been able to remain close to family, healthcare providers, and community supports. Many older residents have lived in these buildings for decades, and because the credit can be used not only for the acquisition, but also for essential repairs and upgrades, nonprofit owners have been able to improve accessibility and safety and core building systems. So looking ahead, our pipeline includes potential transfers that could preserve the affordability of nearly 300 additional homes in communities like Washburn, Alfred, Howland, Eastport, Southwest Harbor, Ellsworth, Camden, Bethel, Vassalboro, Farmingdale. We're really all over the state. Attracting developers to build new units in many of these rural communities is extremely challenging, making preservation of existing housing essential. And the need is not diminishing. Over the next decade, nearly 2,800 homes in Maine are at risk of losing affordability as their USDA mortgages mature. Without the state affordable housing tax credit, we would lose ground faster than we can build new homes. Maine can be proud that the affordable housing tax credit is a high-performing, well-targeted, and efficient tax expenditure. It aligns state housing goals with federal USDA rural housing resources in a way that multiplies rather than duplicating efforts. So thank you for your time and attention and for the committee's thoughtful consideration of the parameters for OPEGA's evaluation. I'd be pleased to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for being here today to provide this excellent testimony to our committee. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else present who wishes to testify on the parameters of these proposals for review? Thank you for being here. Please sign in and tell us where you're from, state your name for the record, and you may begin your testimony whenever you're ready.
Yes, I am Laura Mitchell. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Affordable Housing Coalition. Thank you, Senator Hickman, Representative Mastracchio, and members of the Government Oversight Committee. The Maine Affordable Housing Coalition is a nonprofit membership organization of 140 businesses, nonprofits, and organizations, and 2,500 individuals that advocate for the creation and preservation of affordable housing in Maine. I'm here today in support of this valuable review. We believe it can showcase what we already know to be a successful program in building urgently needed housing throughout Maine, and also preserving vital existing affordable homes. We believe the proposed framework is well-grounded in statute, and it reflects best practices for evaluating tax expenditures and will fairly assess the outsized value this credit delivers to Maine people and Maine communities in having built more than 300 homes and to preserve even more. The stated purposes derived accurately reflect both legislative intent and real-world outcomes that this program delivers. The credit's goals are not abstract. They respond directly to documented housing shortages in every community in Maine and to the vulnerability of rural and federally assisted housing stock that would otherwise be lost without state intervention. We support OPEGA's use of these statutory purposes as the foundation for its review. We also agree with OPEGA's articulation of intended beneficiaries. It is appropriate that the review distinguish between recipients and the actual beneficiaries of this tax credit, as the ultimate policy objective is not developer support, but housing affordability and stability for Maine households. And we've heard this from residents that no longer need to commute long distances to their jobs because they have affordable housing in the communities where they want to work and live. And for seniors that can retire into affordable properties in the communities that they've lived in for a long time and want to stay. The proposed evaluation objectives provide a comprehensive and balanced framework. We believe this review will demonstrate that the state credit is a cost-effective, relatively small investment with a multiplier effect to unlock projects that otherwise would not pencil out, particularly in rural areas and for deeply affordable preservation-focused developments. Finally, the proposed performance measures drawn are clear, measurable, and appropriate. These measures capture both housing production and leverage, two of the most important aspects of a tax credit. We support both the continuation of this tax credit and the proposed review parameters. This framework will allow policymakers to evaluate the credit rigorously, transparently, and fairly, and we are confident that it will show that this is an essential tool in meeting Maine's 80,000 home deficit. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell, for being here today and for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else present who wishes to provide public comment on the parameters of these tax expenditure reviews? Seeing none, the chair will close the public hearing. We appreciate everyone's attention. It is 12:25. We will not take a break because we're almost there. At this point in time, we'll invite OPEGA Director Peter Schleck to join us to discuss OPEGA's proposed provisional scope of review for the Maine Seed Potato Certification Program. Good afternoon, Director.
Good afternoon, Senator Hickman,
Please
Representative
proceed.
Mastracchio, distinguished members. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I will move along as always with the goal of getting everyone on their way, but also giving the time necessary to important matters. If we just look in tab 6, we did want to come back to you with, and I always use the word here provisional because there's always something can come along. I also want to say with regard to the current portfolio of OPEGA work, I think I will provide to you kind of, especially for members who have joined the committee in midstream in January, I think we'll have a check-in just on where sort of the projects all are and what they are, and just to sort of refresh us as briefly as we can, but meaningfully. So I'll be talking to you further about that. In terms of one of the things that was recently approved for review with the proviso that I would come back to you with a proposed scope, we just wanted to show you here is something where when we are able to get to it, the Maine Seed Potato Certification Program, as the members may recall, the chairs of judiciary had been experiencing being approached in the last few years with folks who were growers or seed owners and forgive me if I've got the terminology wrong, we'll get to be experts in this before long. But in terms of what is this program supposed to be doing? Is it a type of insurance? Does it provide any warranty? What is this about? How is it going? What are the inspections like? How are they done? What's the quality assurance? What's the recourse, if any, for folks who are beneficiaries of the program such as it is? We have done our level best to consult further with the chairs of judiciary and to also make sure with the special emphasis, as we always do, but with the special emphasis of the chairs, we reached out to make sure the agriculture, conservation and forestry leadership was aware of this. And so all of that consultation and courtesy was provided. So this is basically the contours of how we would proceed to go about looking at the Maine Seed Potato Certification Program. And with that, this can be amended. We can come back at some point. If we get into the deeper research and something is a little different than what we thought it might be, we will always come back for further guidance and approval. But so we're just seeking provisional approval at this point to give us the basics. And so we feel like we've touched base with the appropriate constituencies, but you of course are our most key constituencies. So.
Thank you, Director. for this provisional scope of work regarding the main seed potato certification program. Is there any question that the committee may have about this? Chair recognizes Representative Lee.
The only thing that I see here, and this looks excellent and thorough, and it could be generated by some of these bullet points, is what we've dealt with in judiciary. And the reason everybody might be asking, why is this a judiciary issue, not an ag issue, is that the folks who have come to us have had sovereign immunity issues. And so we've provided them the ability to make a lawsuit against the state of Maine. And so what I'm almost the question of what remedies exist if an inspection doesn't occur as required is sort of a question that has sort of surfaced for me, and one that I'd like you guys to look into.
Thank you, Representative. Is that an additional?
I think it would just be another bullet point.
Happy to.
I think they were
A friendly
probably headed
amendment,
that
as it
direction.
were. A friendly amendment to this scope would be fine. I think that's what the representative is recommending. Chair recognizes Senator Timberlake.
Thank you. And thank you, Director, for bringing it forward. And I think it's so important that we move forward with this review. I mean, I've had a lot of talk with the potato industry, with all of the drought and everything else that's happened throughout the summer. And what I've really learned on the seed potato program is it's very vital to the state of Maine if we're going to keep our potato industry going. And I'm hearing of all sorts of problems in the seed potato industry with inspectors that have been caught or been seen smoking marijuana during the day and doing some other drugs that they had in state vehicles. And I think it's time we get to the bottom of that and figure out if this is really happening, because this really affects the quality of the potato we grow, and the farmers in Aroostook County and around the state who provide seed potatoes all across the country to Washington State and Idaho and everywhere else. If this program fails on us because of the lack of quality in our seed potato program, it's going to be devastating. And I think the potato industry is like a $1.3 billion industry in the state of Maine. And we just got to get to the bottom and make sure that this stops happening every year. So I'm going to really push that we move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any other questions for Director on his provisional scope of work? The chair recognizes Senator Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Being new on this committee, I'm not sure what the procedure is, but I've been on the potato tour before and realized the importance of the seed potato to the industry. I wondered if there's an opportunity to hear from the representative from Maine Potato. I see Jeannie is in the room, or is that not appropriate?
I appreciate the request, and he's definitely here to make sure that we are doing what we're going to do and to witness it. We will vote. We'll take a vote. The chair will entertain a motion to move forward with this provisional review. When that happens, I suspect that will pass favorably. The office, Opega and director and his staff will do the work. They will produce a report. The report will be presented, and then there'll be a public comment on that report. So just as we had today on the tax expenditure review, there will be a ability for anyone, including the representative from the Potato Board, to at that point in time provide any comment that they have on what has happened. But they may also be involved to the extent that the department will ask them to do it. They may even be involved in the actual evaluation. So for now, I think we'll just continue on with our work here. And I appreciate that everyone is present to witness what we're doing. Chair recognizes Representative Senator Doosan. Excuse me.
Well, I'm just curious, Mr. Director. Will the scope of your review include an examination of whether the inspectors are using marijuana?
Well, the bullets that are in there, how are tests conducted and documented, could conceivably capture, And then there's, of course, how do they ensure there's adequately training, or what are the reasons, if any, if inspections are not taking place or not taking place timely? And then, of course, there's whether tests are being effective or not. I think there's somewhere in the orbit of all of that, the possibility that folks will say something to us that we would consider, but it's not, we're not going out looking. We don't have a particular allegation at this moment that that is the case. It's possible we'll encounter that. And if it's of such a material nature that it might fundamentally alter the scope, I think that's another opportunity for me to come back to you and make sure that the committee is comfortable with our direction.
If I may,
You may.
unless I heard wrong, there was an allegation stated by respectfully from my colleague, Senator Timberlake. And so I wondered, was that sufficient to expand the examination?
I will demur as much as I can to that, Senator, and I very much, with the chair's permission, address you directly on this. I work for the committee, and the committee is fully entitled to say things to me, anything they want to say. I'm a big boy, I can handle it. I will always remain open to hearing the most important. The world needs more listeners. I am here to listen to you, and I am here to consider your views, and we will find a home for this. Just as, if the senator will permit me, the representative of the potato board, I fully expect we will be touching base at appropriate intervals, and they will have an opportunity to understand what we're doing and talk to us. We're always willing and able to talk to people and hear from them. So I guess what I'm trying to delicately say, Senator, is I appreciate that. As a technical legal matter, of course, I take the senator at his word that he is a concern about that. We would, of course, have to consider it as it came up, as we encountered it. The current scope is not about a specific allegation of that nature. If the committee, I'll stop. If the committee does wish to amend at this time, or wait and see how it goes and have us come back, that's the committee.
We'll let Senator Timberlake speak for himself.
Okay.
Senator Timberlake.
Thank you. And thank you, Director. And I guess the comment that I would make to Senator Doosan and to the committee is that I would ask that if, when the director is having a conversation with the main potato board or whomever they're having the conversation with, and they come across an instance where they may be shown proof of somebody going out to their car and who was in the lab and then coming back to the lab, who'd been out smoking or had been taking drugs or something, I would hope that we would allow within it to not have to waste a whole bunch of time coming back to the committee, but we would allow the director to do an investigation and to see if this is a continuation problem to the main seed potato program, because we can't go through another year or two of this not being addressed. I would hope that during the process, when the director is doing the review, that we give him permission to, if in the conversation he finds that this might be out there, that he gets a chance to review that and come back to us. He doesn't have to wait and come back to us.
So, Senator Timberlake, are you proposing a sentence or a phrase or a bullet point to be added to this, as we just did with Representative Lee, that would ask the director to evaluate any impediments that inspectors may experience, self-inflicted or otherwise, that could impact the effectiveness of the tests?
See, I always wait for you, Senator Hickman, to come in and wordsmith what I say into something that's logical.
So I think that bullet point,
and you said it, and you said it very eloquently.
So I think that bullet point at the top of page 2 could just be amended in that way.
If I may beg the indulgence of the chair,
You
if
may.
the chair would reshare that.
Basically, that how does the state otherwise ensure that inspectors perform effective tests, and that anything that would impede the inspectors from performing those inspective tests could be a part of the evaluation, whether that impediment is self-inflicted or not.
Thank you, Senator.
Got it. Any other thoughts on the scope of work? Taking into consideration the two friendly amendments to the scope of work provided by the director, the chair would entertain a motion to direct OPEGA to conduct this provisional scope of the main seed potato certification program review. Is there such a motion? Chair recognizes Senator Farron. Is there a second? Been seconded by Representative Perkins. It's the first hand I saw on my left. Is there any discussion of the motion? Committee ready for the question? All those in favor of the motion, please indicate in the usual manner. It is unanimous. Director, you are you are charged forthwith.
Thank you.
And
Thank
we
you,
look
Senator.
forward to whatever you bring back to
Understood.
us for review,
Understood.
either along the way or at the
Okay.
end of the way.
Very good.
What else? Senator Farron, the committee will be in order. We're
Just-
almost there, people.
So if that leads us, with your permission,
Yes.
Senator, to the director's report,
Yes,
and
it
I am
does.
your director, so meaning the director that serves the committee, not your director. But, Matt, words matter, yes. And wire brushing. I learned something new myself.
I have
I knew
never heard
something
that
myself.
phrase. It's really
So-
okay.
So just briefly, there is a follow-up memo from the Department of Health and Human Services in tab 7 that answers further questions. I realize the membership may not necessarily have had the chance with all the things that went on today. If in the course of travels, those things still have questions for you, if with the blessing of the chairs, we always meet before the next meeting, and if this needs to come back up
Yeah.
with the permission of the chairs, but I obviously, if you have a chance, feel free to pull that right out of the book if you don't have access to your email real quick and easy. But this was emailed to you and it's there. So things can always come back.
Yes, and so for committee members who are seeing and will read this maybe for the third time, if you believe after reading these responses that we need to have a more direct conversation again, please let the chairs know that we can make sure to put that on the future agenda. Thank you.
And then just turning, there should be perhaps a green construction paper, just turning, a little housekeeping matter, just to let you know that the chairs with the vote of the committee did transmit to state and local that perhaps they would like to consider the status of the appearance of conflict of interest statute and related matters as they came up in the OPEGA report. So that's an invitation that was sent. And then just obviously our first meeting of the new year, subject to confirmation by the chairs, is going to be January 9th. The statutory obligation I have, among others, is to deliver you an annual report on activities that's due January 15th. So we will be comfortably within those margins. And again, as I mentioned, I will try to take the liberty of, in addition to telling you what we have done in the past year, as we can just briefly review it, I want to give you a little flavor of where there's a lot of things, and we just want to give you sort of a relative status of where those things are. Because world events, state events, something can come up in the meantime that we might want to report back to you on and ask if that changes the formulas at all. So that really is it. We offer our every good wishes for the holiday season and a safe and happy new year. And it has been our great privilege to be of service once again to the committee. And as always, we can receive your individual communiques, and we can, anything I can do to answer your questions here or offline if it's something I can answer and it's appropriate to answer in that forum. So.
Thank you, Director. Chair recognizes Senator Farron.
So just clarifying, because I'm just looking, so January 9th is our next scheduled?
That is correct.
That is correct. I got that. Number 2, Merry Christmas to you and your family and the entire team here that makes us look a lot smarter than we are, which is great. Lastly, just clarification in my mind. I did have that laundry list of things hanging out there as we keep going along. So that will be part of the agenda when we talk about the FOA, the child payment, so all that stuff. We're going to circle back in January. Chelsea,
Foster care payments,
all of that.
Juniper Ridge. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, perfect.
Just wanna-
Thank you very, very
It's
much.
all in the hopper.
All in the hopper. And again, I'm just glad to know that Senator Hickman speaks Senator Timberlake.
I'm a good translator.
Interpreter, not a translator.
I'm still here.
I actually meant translator. I'm just gonna say that. Any other thoughts before we depart?
Because he speaks farmer.
It is our final meeting of the year. I want to thank the staff for actually what Senator Farron said, making us look like we know exactly what we're doing. It's been a pleasure and honor to work with you, sir. And Ms. Griner, thank you very much for keeping me on point as I sift through some IT issues with emails and whatnot. That being said, I wish everyone on this committee safe journey, safe travels, good meal, festive New Year, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Hanukkah, all the rest. I say happy Hanukkah sometimes just to try to get it all in. There are cakes, cupcakes, and there are candies and all the other things that we have here. So, Senator, do something.
But there's
Birthday.
cupcakes.
Oh, is your birthday today?
Yes.
Oh, well, in that case,
Happy birthday.
in that case.
You're not gonna sing.
Yes.
No.
Yes, off mic, I'm going to say.
Okay.
And so what I'm going to say is that unless there is anything that anyone else wants to say, and without objection, the Joint Legislative Committee on Government Oversight stands adjourned.
Yeah.